On January 6, 1999, the crew of a tugboat encountered difficulties while trying to dock their vessel. When workmen went down to examine what had jammed the propeller, they made a shocking discovery. It was human skin that had been fashioned into a suit. A week later, authorities revealed that the remains belonged to missing 23-year-old Katarzyna Zowada. Investigators began a search for the person responsible for the killing that lasted nearly 2 decades. But the question was, who had lured the young woman to her death? And what drove her killer to mutilate the body to such an extent? Hello, and welcome back to M7 Crime Story Time, where we cover solved, unsolved, and twisted cases from around the world. Beautiful city of Krakow in Poland. With a population of 800,000, it's the second largest city in Poland and one of the oldest. Krakow's history is steeped in mythology, with the belief that the settlement was founded over the cave of the Wawel dragon. Famous for its medieval town, once the center of trade, which has become a heritage site protected by the United Nations Environmental, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. In terms of affordable living, Krakow has been considered an ideal location for those working with a budget, and is one of the safest cities in Europe. But tourists are warned to be wary of pickpockets. It's here that Katarzyna Zowada was born and would meet her tragic demise. Born on June 1, 1975 in Krakow, Poland, Katarzyna Zowada was the only child of Martha and Antoni Zowada. Growing up, Katarzyna was a happy child who enjoyed outdoor activities and listening to music by artists from the 1960s. One of her favorite bands was the Grateful Dead. Katarzyna was particularly close to her father, and the two often went out together for hikes along nature routes. However, it was during one of these adventures that disaster struck. While on a hike in 1995, Antoni slipped and ended up injuring his spine severely. A year later, he passed away after suffering with various spine-related illnesses. Katarzyna went into a depression following his death, believing herself responsible for it all. Her mother, Martha, became involved in helping Katarzyna overcome her depression. She began visiting a psychiatrist at the Nowa Huta Hospital in Krakow. Katarzyna also started attending Jagiellonian University. She enrolled to study psychology, but within the first semester changed her major to history before settling on religious studies. The few friends she did have described Katarzyna as a nice person who often seemed sad. Katarzyna was a responsible young woman who was determined to get help to overcome her struggle with depression. That was why, when she failed to attend an appointment on November 12, 1998, her mother Martha knew something was wrong. Concerned for Katarzyna's safety, Martha started to think about anything strange in her daughter's behavior that morning. The last time she'd seen her was before she left home for university. It was then she started to have scary thoughts about what could have happened to Katarzyna. Martha feared that Katarzyna had perhaps decided to forget getting treatment from a professional and opted to join one of the many cults that had sprung up in Poland to find her path in life. Fearing this scenario, Martha visited a reputed Dominican church in Krakow. The church was known for intervening with cult recruits and extracting them from these groups. The church leaders advised Martha to report Katarzyna missing. That afternoon, Martha visited the Krakow police station to file a missing person report. She told officers that she last saw Katarzyna that morning, but her daughter failed to make a scheduled appointment with a psychiatrist. She described Katarzyna as being responsible and determined to overcome life's hurdles. She told police that Katarzyna was last seen wearing a hooded corduroy coat, black jeans, and red shoes. However, the police seemed less than helpful. Given that Katarzyna had suffered with depression and was at an impressionable age, they believed she'd run away by her own choice. Frustrated, Martha contacted private investigators to help her search for Katarzyna. She also took to canvassing for her daughter on her own by visiting the university and asking questions about her whereabouts at popular hangout spots frequented by students. In the month that followed, Martha received 2 phone calls from an anonymous male caller who told Martha that he had information related to Katarzyna's disappearance. Hesitant, Martha told the private investigator about the phone calls and that the person wanted to meet with her in the Krakow Market Square. She was advised that it may have been a prank caller and, in the end, didn't follow up on the lead. There was also a report that Katarzyna was spotted riding a bus in Walbrum, but it was never verified. At the same time, the police had also failed to follow up on any leads regarding Katarzyna's disappearance. But the case was about to take a sinister and disturbing twist in the new year. In the early morning hours of January 6, 1999, crewmen on the pusher tugboat The Elk were returning from a long day of work on the Vistula River in Krakow. As they approached the harbor and prepared to dock, the propeller seized. The river was known to be polluted by everyday debris, so they were not overly concerned. The crew were able to float the boat the last few meters and dock. The men, along with their captain, were tired, hungry, and cold. They opted to get a good night's sleep and clear out the engine when they returned after sunrise. When the crewmen opened the engine hatch, they found a pale and spotted type of material tangled up in the propeller blade. The smell coming from the material was terrible. As they pulled on the object, the men believed that a large piece of leather had somehow floated into the engine from the river. Once the object was freed from the propeller blade, the men took a closer look. Their simple task of cleaning the engine had taken on an unexpected and horrific turn. The men noticed what looked like a human ear attached to folds of skin. The captain called the police immediately as the rest of the crew set about to look for a body. They believed that the body may have been damaged by the propeller and the skin may have been cut away from the victim. But there was nothing else in the engine compartment. The police arrived at the dock and set about examining the skin that had been pulled from the propeller. From what they could see, the unknown victim had been meticulously skinned like an animal. The remains were taken to the office of the medical examiner as divers and investigators began a thorough search of the Vistula River. On January 14, 1999, a week after the discovery of the skin, they found a right leg, a piece of flesh from a buttock, and several scraps of denim and flannel. DNA testing also provided investigators with the identity of the unknown victim, Katarzyna Zowada. Retracing Katarzyna's final moments before her death was going to prove difficult. Police had not taken the initial missing persons report seriously, therefore losing crucial investigation time in the last 2 months. An autopsy was performed on Katarzyna's remains, and at first, investigators believed that she died after falling into the Vistula River. On the surface, it looked as though Katarzyna's body had been damaged by the propeller, leading to the severe mutilation. The autopsy results were about to reveal a shocking and violent picture. The medical examiner determined that the skin was peeled off Katarzyna's body and made into a skin suit that was possibly used by the killer. Her limbs and head had been removed. There were also several wounds and lacerations on the skin that suggested Katarzyna had been beaten and stabbed before she was eventually killed. Another shocking discovery made by the medical examiner was puncture wounds under the victim's arms and on the inside of the thighs. These wounds suggested that the killer targeted the major arteries and left Katarzyna to bleed to death. It was determined that the makeshift skin suit had been left in the river for 2 to 3 weeks before it was discovered. The discovery altered the course of the investigation. Police were now looking for a sadistic killer. The shocking nature of the crime gripped Poland, and investigators were starting to develop some of their own theories. Based on the report of the medical examiner, investigators started to draw parallels to the 1991 movie Silence of the Lambs. In the movie, the killer, Buffalo Bill, was known to murder women and flay them before fashioning their skin into bodysuits. Another coincidence was one of the victims in the movie was named Kate, which is the English equivalent to the Polish name Katarzyna. This theory pushed investigators to suspect that it was possible Katarzyna's killer was preying on her prior to her disappearance and murder. They needed to look into her final moments before her death. Investigators spoke to Martha and asked her if she had noticed anything different about Katarzyna. She told officers that her daughter had recently started to lose weight and changed her hair color from black to blonde. Other than that, Martha wasn't aware of any deviation from her normal routine. It was then that investigators spoke to friends and professors from the university. It was news to Martha when investigators discovered that Katarzyna had stopped attending classes 3 weeks before she was reported missing. Martha told investigators that Katarzyna would wake up every day at the same time and return home every evening as she normally had when she was attending classes. This revelation strengthened the theory of the investigation team that it was probable Katarzyna had developed a relationship with her killer weeks earlier. They believed that her killer may have connected with Katarzyna through a shared interest and slowly started to prime her for his own reasons. This was evident with her sudden interest in dieting and weight loss. It may have also been at the killer's suggestion that she change her appearance. But her friends and mother made no mention of Katarzyna having met anyone prior to her murder. Despite the interviews with people who knew Katarzyna, investigators were left with little to no clues. Then, after months of looking for answers, they received their first lead. On May 31, 1999, the Krakow Police Department received a call from an elderly man who reported that there had been a murder in his house. Upon arrival, police met the elderly man who walked them to the basement where they found the victim decapitated. The head was discovered next to the body and had been flayed. As they made their way back to the kitchen, they came across a bizarre sight. The man's grandson, Vladimir W., was singing in Russian and dancing. Polish authorities do not release the full name of a suspect to avoid any problems they may face after being released from prison. Police questioned the man, who admitted to killing his 50-year-old father. Vladimir then admitted that he put on his father's skin mask and clothes, then pretended to be his deceased father while speaking to his grandfather. Vladimir was taken in for interrogation, and investigators quickly discovered that both he and Katarzyna attended the same university. He had finished a year before her. After further questioning, investigators realized that the two didn't know each other. There was also no evidence to suggest that Katarzyna had been in the suspect's house. Vladimir told investigators that he killed his father because of a personal vendetta he developed due to abandonment. His motive could not be linked to Katarzyna's murder, as her death appeared more random than personal. Vladimir would eventually be convicted of his father's murder and was sent to a Russian prison after serving 5 years in the Polish prison system. In the year 2000, investigators were set on the path of another man. His identity wasn't revealed to the public because he was only a person of interest. The man in question was considered a loner who had a history of stalking women along the Vistula River. A background check revealed that he'd been charged for assault by a woman years earlier, but nothing had come of it. Although he looked promising as a suspect, investigators eventually let him go due to a lack of evidence. The case started to grow cold as leads were few and far between. Investigators could not link other possible suspects to Katarzyna's murder, and by the mid-2000s, the case officially grew cold. Advancements in forensic technology gave investigators who'd been working on Katarzyna's case a new promising chance at solving the mystery of her killer's identity. In 2012, the prosecutor's office decided to reopen Katarzyna's case and assembled a team of police officers from the cold case unit dubbed the X-Files. After gaining permission from Katarzyna's family, her remains were exhumed and retested for foreign DNA. Together, experts from the 3D Expertise Laboratory of the Wrocław Medical University collaborated with investigators and forensic specialists. They reconstructed a 3-dimensional model of Katarzyna and added to it the possible injuries, based on autopsy reports, that may have been inflicted on her prior to death. From their observation, forensic specialists determined that Katarzyna was beaten with a weapon used by someone who trained in martial arts. Forensic teams also discovered vegetation on Katarzyna's skin that was not consistent with that found in or near the Vistula River. This proved to them that Katarzyna was murdered in a different location and then transported to and disposed of in the river. The forensic team added that it was possible Katarzyna was drugged and endured prolonged torture before she was eventually killed. Armed with this new evidence, investigators looked further afield for help in developing a profile of the killer. In 2014, Polish authorities looked for help from international investigation agencies. Most notably, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, stepped in and began developing a profile of the killer. According to the final profile developed for the case, the FBI believed that the suspect was a male in his 20s or 30s. The suspect's psychological profile suggested that he would have had narcissistic tendencies and exhibit sadistic and generally abnormal behavior in social situations. The profile also suggested that the suspect had above-average intelligence and was motivated to murder due to the pleasure he felt at taking another human life. He may have been unable to reach the level of pleasure he desired through normal intimacy and turned to inflicting pain on others as a way to satisfy his needs. They believed that the killer would have been skilled with his hands, prompting them to believe he could be a butcher, surgeon, veterinarian, or tailor. He may also have had a strong desire to be a female. The savage manner of the killing also suggested that the suspect had a deep anger towards women, and not just Katarzyna. The profile indicated that this anger stemmed from his inability to be a female. It also noted that he was likely someone who stalked his victims and developed a friendly relationship of sorts before luring them to their death. In their findings, the FBI concluded that the suspect was likely to repeat this offense. With a fresh perspective, they started to look at several possible suspects, but for 5 years, the case remained stagnant. It was an unexpected call that made them revisit an old suspect. The Polish media began reporting about the new developments in Katarzyna's case. In 2017, a woman who remained anonymous called the police with some interesting information. The woman alleged to know a man who was a mechanic and sometimes worked at the local mortuary. She told officers that he showed an unusual interest in Katarzyna's murder and the subsequent investigation. She also remarked that he lived in close proximity to the river where the young woman's remains were discovered. He was identified as 52-year-old Robert Janczewski and lived in Krakow's Kazimierzy district. Oddly enough, Robert was suspect number 2 in the original investigation, but at the time, investigators couldn't find enough evidence to link him to the murder. Armed with the new evidence, investigators started to look into Robert's background. They discovered that he actually ticked several of the boxes in the FBI profile. There has not been much information released about Robert, but based on police records, some information has become available to the public. Robert served in the Polish military and worked in the mortuary by assisting with dissections. After returning to Krakow, he gained employment at the Krakow Zoological Institute, where he was responsible for skinning animals. However, he was fired after he killed several rabbits that had been used in experiments. When questioned, he couldn't provide a reason for his behavior. He then drifted about, doing odd jobs to make a living. He never did amount to much in his life career-wise, but was considered unusually intelligent. Robert was known around the city and often walked aimlessly, getting to know the streets of Krakow better. Investigators questioned people who knew of Robert and learned a great deal more that provided some circumstantial evidence to their investigation. It's understood that Robert often enjoyed cross-dressing. They were told that he had a tendency to stalk women as they walked along the Vistula River. However, investigators' interest grew when they discovered that Robert attended a local gym and had trained in the martial arts. He was also known to frequent cinemas in his free time. Further questioning with people that knew Robert revealed that after he was interviewed by police in the year 2000, he took an interest in religion and began attending Mass daily. Looking through their notes, investigators found another odd detail. Martha, Katarzyna's mother, mentioned that every time she visited her daughter's grave, she found a burnt-out candle. Investigators were struck by this oddity and questioned cemetery workers who said that Robert visited the grave of Katarzyna daily. They also noticed him bearing a letter near her grave. These discoveries led investigators to placing surveillance cameras in strategic areas to monitor Robert's movements. They found that Robert visited Katarzyna's grave every night. Investigators also dug up certain parts of the graveyard to look for the letters he allegedly buried, but nothing was found. After months of watching his everyday routine, investigators decided to make their move. Robert was arrested on October 4, 2017 on suspicion of murder with regard to Katarzyna Zowada. While he was being questioned by police, another team conducted a search of his home. Robert denied knowing Katarzyna or having anything to do with her disappearance or murder, but the team searching his home uncovered evidence that proved otherwise. In Robert's possession was a diary. The notes he made detailed several incidents of stalking that he carried out on numerous women. Most damning of all was that it detailed his meeting and eventual murder of Katarzyna. Robert made notes about how he became friends with Katarzyna and had started to gain her trust. He described the method and included information on how he met her and feigned an interest in the books and music she often spoke about. He also detailed how his subtle manipulation led to Katarzyna starting to alter her appearance to better suit what he believed was the ideal woman. However, the most disturbing aspect was the details he recorded of her murder. Police never released the actual information, but provided details on how he set up the fateful meeting between them on November 12, 1998. According to police in the diary, on the day she disappeared, Katarzyna agreed to meet with Robert and visit a cottage he'd suggested to her some time ago. The two of them met in Krakow city center and took a bus out to the countryside. Robert knew the area well and was aware that during the weekdays it was quiet. The area was used as a farming area by the locals who owned these cottages and normally rented them out on weekends. Katarzyna was unaware the entire time that she was walking into a well-devised trap set up by the one person she trusted, Robert. Investigators were able to locate the cottage and, in the bathroom, found biological evidence that matched with the DNA of Katarzyna Zowada. They were able to build a picture of what may have happened to Katarzyna. Investigators believe that Robert held the young woman hostage in the cottage until mid-December 1998, an entire month after she was reported missing. It was here he carried out his torture of his victim. Investigators stated that they believed that Katarzyna was restrained with an ankle strap on her right leg. They also concluded that the injuries visible on her skin could have been caused by heavier blunt instruments such as barbells. They described it as a slow torture until she eventually died. Thereafter, Robert dismembered and flayed Katarzyna before getting rid of the remains he didn't need in the Vistula River. He then used Katarzyna's skin to make himself a bodysuit. When the bodysuit didn't fit him, he decided to discard the remains in the Vistula River, expecting all the evidence to float away and never be found. Robert was charged with the murder of Katarzyna in 2017. The case details were not revealed publicly, but Robert remained detained in prison since his arrest. In December 2018, he made allegations of abuse against prison officials, but a judge found that the claims were false. With the COVID-19 pandemic, Robert's case was one of many delayed by the global lockdown. However, justice was finally served in 2022 when Robert was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The case of Katarzyna did raise doubts among the general public. As much as they wanted to see someone pay for the violent murder of the young woman with such potential, many questioned the evidence and the manner in which the investigation remained a closely guarded secret. In the end, the justice system saw it fit to charge Robert based on the case brought against him by the prosecution. For Katarzyna's mother, no amount of justice would be able to bring back her only child, and the horror of her death will continue to haunt her for the rest of her life. Today's case not only highlighted the depravity and dangers that lurk in every corner of society, but the victims as being some of the most vulnerable people around us. Robert easily manipulated Katarzyna and preyed on her weaknesses to fulfill his sadistic desires. Perhaps Robert could have been caught earlier on in the case if the police took his mother's concerns seriously. Do you believe that it was the lack of police interest that led to Katarzyna's death? What more could have been done to prevent such a tragedy?
At the top tonight, a Brownsville family is asking for help. Their daughter found dead in Matamoros.
All of her teeth were taken out, and she was so bruised. Police believe that she was tortured.
The morning of August 9th, 2020 was a normal day for Lizbeth Flores, her two children, and the residents of Brownsville, Texas. However, all that changed when Lizbeth received a call from Mexico informing her that the father of her two kids had been kidnapped and a ransom was demanded for his return. In a panic, Lizbeth put together the little money that she had and left for the trip to Mexico, but she was never seen again. What happened to Lizbeth? Did she simply have an accident, or is there a more disturbing reason for her disappearance? Brownsville is a Texas town with a population of 186,000, bordering Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico. It's a part of the Matamoros-Brownsville metro area and has an Hispanic culture and a subtropical climate. It was founded in 1848 by Charles Stillman, a riverboat businessman. It's also a wildlife refuge with several state parks and historical sites. Brownsville has a high percentage of Hispanic Americans, 93.9%, the third highest in the U.S. outside of Puerto Rico. The crime rate in Brownsville is 206 per 100,000 people, which is lower than the U.S. average, but higher than most U.S. cities. The crime rate decreased by 11% from 2019 to 2020. This is the city where Lizbeth Flores lived. Lizbeth Flores was born on May 30th, 1997 in Brownsville, Texas. She was the daughter of Jose Luis Flores and Rubio Maria de Los Angeles Hernandez. She's also a lovely sister to her two brothers, Cesar Saldana and Edric Saldana, and her four sisters, Carmen Flores, Jaslyn Saldana, Jasmine Saldana, and Irina Saldana. Lizbeth grew up in a loving and supportive family that valued education, faith, and community. She attended Los Fresnos High School, where she excelled academically and socially. She participated in various extracurricular activities and had a passion for learning and exploring new things. She enjoyed reading, writing, and traveling. In 2016, at age 19, Lizbeth fell in love with a man living in Matamoros, Mexico. The couple's love grew even though the boyfriend was not always around. Soon, Lizbeth became pregnant. Together, the couple had two children, a daughter 4 years old named Maria Ivana Morales, who Lizbeth gave birth to when she was 19 years old, and a son, 8-month-old Nelson Ivan Morales, who Lizbeth gave birth to when she was 23 years old. Lizbeth was a devoted mother to her two children. Not much is known about the father's involvement with the children, but she raised them with the help of her parents and siblings who adored them as if they were their own. Lizbeth loved her children more than anything in the world and dedicated her life to providing them with a happy and healthy upbringing. She taught them to be respectful, compassionate, and curious. She also encouraged them to pursue their dreams and hobbies, such as dancing, soccer, and painting. Lizbeth was a sociable, friendly, and humorous person with numerous friends and admirers. She was known for her warm personality, willingness to help others, and her talent for making people laugh with her witty jokes and stories. Lizbeth had many dreams and aspirations for herself and her children. She wanted to see her children grow up into successful and happy adults who'd follow their passions and make their own mark on the world. On August 9, 2020, Lizbeth Flores received a distressing call at her home in Brownsville, Texas. The caller claimed that Lizbeth's boyfriend and father of her two children had been kidnapped by a criminal group in Matamoros, Mexico. He urged her to come and pay the ransom. Lizbeth didn't hesitate. She grabbed her belongings and rushed to the border. She crossed the Veterans International Bridge into Mexico, hoping to help in any way she could. When she crossed into Matamoros on foot, she was carrying an undisclosed amount of cash. Once in Matamoros, Mexico, Lizbeth called her mother, Maria Rubio, and told her about the situation. She assured her that she'd be back home later that night. Although Rubio was worried, she trusted her daughter's judgment. Unfortunately, Lizbeth never returned home. She had gone missing in the Mexican border city of Matamoros. The next day, August 10, 2020, Maria Rubio reported her daughter as a missing person to the Brownsville Police Department. The Brownsville Police Department immediately set out to find Lizbeth. However, because she went missing in Mexico, they had to inform the Mexican authorities. On August 11, 2020, a horrific discovery was made in Matamoros, Mexico. A woman's body lay face up in a grassy field along Libramiento Emilio Potes Gil in Matamoros. The area had earned notoriety for deadly robberies. However, this woman had been tortured and killed in a particularly brutal manner. The body was partially clothed and lying face up with a large rock beside her. She had a fatal head injury. Her scalp had been peeled off and her teeth had been forcefully removed. She also had bruises all over her body. Soon enough, the Tamaulipas State Police were informed about the body, and following information from the Brownsville Police Department, she was identified as Lizbeth Flores, the 23-year-old American citizen who'd gone missing the previous day. Matamoros, Mexico had been plagued by crime and insecurity due to the presence of rival cartel groups. The Northeast Cartel and the Gang from Hell were two of the most notorious gangs around. They'd been fighting for control of the area and extorting, kidnapping, and killing people. At first, the police thought that Lizbeth may have been caught in their crossfire or targeted for ransom, but there is no evidence to support that. The brutality of the attack also spurred speculation that robbery might not have been the motive, since the place was known for murders. However, authorities refrained from speculation and focused on gathering more information. Further investigation revealed that the cause of her death was a severe head injury caused by a large rock, the same rock that was found at the crime scene. The autopsy confirmed that she was tortured extensively before she was killed. Because she was an American citizen that was murdered in a foreign country, the FBI got involved in the investigation. Both U.S. and Mexican law enforcement agencies collaborated to seek justice for the Flores family and their community. When Lizbeth's mother heard the news, she was devastated.
At the top tonight, a Brownsville family is asking for help. Their daughter found dead in Matamoros. The victim's mother speaking with Channel 5 about what she thinks happened and who might be responsible.
Le tuve que hablar a la policía aquí de Brownsville para que me ayudara, para que ellos abrieran una investigación, si la buscaran, a ver dónde se encontraba. Pero no he recibido ningún tipo de ayuda de nadie. Ella tenía signos de violencia. Ella fue torturada cruelmente. Yo no sé quién le hizo eso, porque eso no se le hace. Pues ella era una niña que ella era de su trabajo a la casa. Sí, yo quiero justicia por lo que le hicieron a mi hija. Mi hija no merecía esto.
She said she wanted to see her body and bring it back to the U.S. so she could personally confirm her identity. She expressed her grief for what her daughter had endured in her last moments. Losing a child is akin to having your heart torn asunder, Lizbeth's heartbroken mother cried. I'm overwhelmed with sorrow for what they subjected my daughter to, Rubio conveyed in Spanish to Telemundo. The manner in which they abandoned her, the agony my daughter endured there in that moment, that's what wounds me deeply. She passionately called for justice to be served for her daughter. She was so young. She had her whole life ahead of her, specifically because she had 2 children, Rubio emphasized. I want those responsible for my daughter's suffering, every single person involved in her death, to be held accountable. Rubio's plea must have motivated the authorities because on August 18, 2020, the police arrested a suspect in the case, Braulio Trevino Martinez. On Tuesday, August 18, 2020, authorities in Matamoros apprehended Braulio Trevino Martinez at his home in the subdivision of Molinos del Rey, Mexico, in connection with the horrific murder of Lizbeth Flores. Martinez, a 39-year-old Mexican national, was known to Lizbeth and her family as well as her boyfriend, although the exact nature of their relationship remains unknown. Martinez became the prime suspect due to a trail of evidence, including fingerprints on her clothing and body, as well as cell phone records leading from Brownsville, Texas to Matamoros, Mexico. Lizbeth's cell phones guided authorities to Martinez's residence in Mexico. The authorities were able to confirm from phone records that it was Martinez who called to allegedly lure her to Mexico to rob her. It's unknown why Martinez chose Lizbeth to rob, especially considering she didn't have much money. Investigators believe that the horrific nature of her death was an attempt to make it look like it was carried out by the local cartel. The police were able to identify Martinez's fingerprints quickly because Martinez was a registered offender in Texas who had served time in prison. Texas jail records showed that in 2006, Martinez was in prison for offenses involving a minor. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of assault and was subsequently incarcerated in Huntsville State Prison for 4 years. At that time, he lived in Brownsville. Martinez finished his sentence and was released in 2010. At the time of his arrest in Mexico, Martinez also had an outstanding warrant for his arrest in Georgia. During his stint in prison, his fingerprints and DNA were collected and stored in the state's database. Therefore, the FBI simply needed to retrieve this information from the state's records and gave it to the Mexican authorities, who then matched it with the evidence collected from the crime scene. This database proved invaluable in swiftly identifying Martinez as a suspect in Lizbeth's murder. On Monday, August 24, 2020, the Tamaulipas State Prosecutor's Office officially filed murder charges against Braulio Martinez. The judge secured a ruling that ordered Martinez to remain in custody while awaiting trial. If convicted, Martinez could face up to life imprisonment. No information on his trial date can be found at this time. Martinez, of course, is innocent until proven guilty. Carmen Flores, Lizbeth's sister, took to Facebook to disclose that Martinez had sent her text messages before going to jail, where he denied knowing where her sister was. She expressed a bittersweet sense of relief knowing that he'd been arrested. Carmen believed that Martinez must be held accountable for his alleged actions, although she felt that any punishment he received would never truly suffice for the harm inflicted upon her sister. However, she emphasized that she'd rather him in jail than on the streets hurting someone else. Carmen stated that he's a liar, a scoundrel who even texted me saying he couldn't find Lizbeth anywhere in Matamoros, but he left enough evidence. This man is the culprit, and people must accept him and stop gossiping. There's a very great God, and everything is paid in this world. While all this was ongoing, Lizbeth Flores' remains remained in a morgue in northeastern Mexico, awaiting repatriation to Texas for her final resting place. To cover funeral expenses and support her children's future, her family initiated a GoFundMe campaign. I'm still trying to raise money for my sister's funeral. My family has been so stressed because we still haven't raised enough money and her body is decomposing, Carmen Flores wrote on her Facebook account. If you find it in your heart the need to donate in our time of need, we would greatly appreciate it. Anything will help. Thank you in advance, and God bless you. Juan Carlos Q. Vega, Mexico's consul in Brownsville, Texas, disclosed that the Mexican government has extended an offer of assistance to Maria Rubio in repatriating her daughter, Lizbeth Flores, before a local funeral parlor stepped in to provide aid to the grieving family. Vega further mentioned that the funeral home could take care of everything once they completed the process of obtaining clearance from U.S. Customs and Border Protection to facilitate the return of Lizbeth's body. There's no information on what happened to the father of her children or whether he was ever investigated in connection to the plot. The news of Lizbeth Flores' tragic fate deeply touched her hometown of Brownsville, where she had strong community ties despite her life ending in Matamoros. The community rallied together to support the Flores family during their challenging period. They organized vigils to honor Lizbeth's memory. With tearful embraces, they shared stories celebrating her vibrant and warm personality. Local businesses also contributed by donating to funds for Lizbeth's children, now left without their mother. Lizbeth's 2 children now live with their grandmother, Maria Rubio. While this heart-wrenching tragedy occurred in Brownsville, its impact has reverberated across 2 nations. Lizbeth Flores' unsettling fate has drawn attention to the often perilous situations faced by women living along the border. Advocates for women's safety in border communities stated that much more needs to be done to protect young mothers like Lizbeth. They viewed her tragic death as part of a troubling trend of violence against women in the region. Lizbeth Flores' story serves as a reminder to trust your instincts and seek help when something feels wrong. Lizbeth Flores called her mother from Matamoros and told her about the situation. This contributed to the early search for her and the quick arrest of Martinez. If found guilty, what sentence do you think would be suitable for Martinez, considering his criminal background? What do you think should be done to prevent this sort of tragedy from happening again in the future? Please be careful when traveling to unfamiliar or dangerous places. Always reach out to someone you trust or contact the authorities if you're unsure of what's going on. November 16, 2009 was a day that shattered all notions of security for 28-year-old Geeta Aulakh, a dedicated mother and diligent professional living in Greenford, London. On her way back from work to reunite with her 2 sons, she was ruthlessly attacked by unknown assailants and abandoned with severe injuries. As she fought for her life, residents of the quiet suburban community were left reeling in shock. What hidden motives lay beneath the attack? Was this a random act of violence, or a meticulously planned murder in a web of deception and betrayal? Nestled in the heart of West London lies Greenford, an old-fashioned suburb known for its tree-lined streets and large parks. With a current population of around 50,000 residents, this charming town offers a tranquil living experience balanced with a proximity to bustling city life. Greenford is celebrated for its rich cultural diversity and has a significant population of ethnic minorities. The town has consistently maintained a low crime rate, well below the national UK average. However, beneath this seemingly peaceful facade, a shocking and cold-blooded crime unfolded, challenging the very essence of this community's perceived safety. Geeta Aulakh was born on April 4, 1981 in the UK to parents Lakhwinder Singh Shin and Nardesh Kumari Shin, who had immigrated from India. Geeta grew up in the bustling suburb of Southall in a large and loving family with 2 sisters and 2 brothers. As the cherished daughter of hardworking Sikh parents, she carried with her the values of dedication and family. When Geeta was just 17 years old, she met and fell in love with 20-year-old Harpreet Aulakh, also known as Sunny. Born in 1978 in Punjab, India, Sunny had recently arrived in the UK. However, Geeta's parents disapproved of their relationship. Sunny was from a poor Sikh family and had entered the UK illegally. On top of that, he was already suspected by Indian police of involvement in a series of crimes back in Punjab. But Geeta was consumed by the passion of first love. Despite her parents' opposition, she and Sunny eloped to Europe while she was still a teenager. They got married in Belgium in 1999 and later returned to London after their first son was born in 2001. Geeta went on to have another son and later began working as a receptionist at Sunrise Radio, an Asian radio station based in London. Her world revolved around her 2 children, 10-year-old Karam and 8-year-old Tejdeep, for whom she tirelessly strived to provide the best life possible. Colleagues and friends described Geeta as an uncomplaining individual who always put the needs of her children before her own. According to her friend Seema Sida from Sunrise Radio, Geeta would often say, "I've made my own bed and I have to live with it," expressing her determination and independence. Unfortunately, nobody could have guessed the struggles Geeta had been living with or the tragic fate that awaited her. Geeta's relationship with Sunny started as a passionate romance, but as time went on, a dark undercurrent began to surface. Sunny's initial charm gave way to violent and aggressive tendencies. He exhibited bouts of anger that grew increasingly frequent and intense, displaying a pattern of toxic behaviors. Sunny would belittle Geeta at every turn and often in public, undermining her self-esteem and confidence. As a result of this emotional abuse, Geeta grew timid and reserved. She didn't confide in anyone about her situation, but her colleagues at the radio station sensed that someone was harassing her. In January 2009, when Sunny was away on a trip to India, Geeta took a brave step and moved to Greenford with her children. During this time, Sunny would frequently call Geeta, obsessively inquiring if she was involved with someone else. He grew so suspicious that he even hacked into her Facebook account. He also confronted Geeta's sister Anita, accusing Geeta of having a boyfriend and threatening the whole family. Finally, in August 2009, Geeta filed for divorce, detailing Sunny's violent tendencies throughout their marriage. She was seeking a fresh start. On the ill-fated day of November 16, 2009, Geeta boarded a bus to Brond Avenue to pick up her sons from the childminder before the short walk home. As she walked to the childminder's house, 2 unknown men accosted her. One was armed with a machete, and he launched a sudden and ruthless attack. Geeta bravely tried to shield herself, using her right hand to protect her head. However, in a single powerful blow, her hand was severed, an act of unspeakable violence. In a mere 3 minutes, Geeta was left with severe wounds to her face and skull while her attackers fled the scene. A passerby found her bleeding on the sidewalk and immediately called emergency services. Geeta was taken to Charing Cross Hospital in a critical condition. Unfortunately, the injuries inflicted upon her were fatal, and she tragically passed away 3 hours later in the hospital. Pathologist Dr. Ashley Fegan-Earle, who conducted Geeta's autopsy, stated that she'd suffered at least 4 forceful and rapid blows to her head, causing uncommonly serious injuries. He expressed doubt that any medical intervention could have saved her life. Her hand, severed during the attack, was deemed a defensive injury. Dr. Fegan-Earle emphasized that the assailant had used a heavy and exceptionally sharp weapon for the attack, noting the rarity of finding such weapons. The horrific attack on this young and devoted mother left the community in disbelief and mourning. The investigation began swiftly as authorities responded to the shocking crime scene. Investigators knew that the nature of the attack suggested a personal vendetta, so they delved into her personal life, relationships, and recent activities. Interviews with Geeta's family revealed her impending divorce with Sunny, giving the husband a potential motive. Their suspicions were further strengthened by the fact that Sunny had incessantly harassed Geeta and even threatened her sister Anita. But Sunny had an alibi for the night of the murder. He was in a pub drinking all night, right in front of the CCTV camera. Sunny also seemed disconsolate with grief and rage, vowing to find whomever had murdered his wife. The police had no choice but to take him off the suspect list. They explored other leads, but only found dead ends. Just as progress was stalling, a man approached the police, claiming to be a witness to the crime. 30-year-old Jaswant Dillon told the police that two men had ambushed Geeta suddenly when she got off the bus and started walking toward the childminder's house. One was on the lookout, while the other had a big sharp blade with which he hacked at Geeta. Dillon described the attack in detail and said it was over in a matter of seconds. Dillon also led the police to the Grand Union Canal in Slough, Berkshire, where the attackers had disposed of the weapon in a jacket. This was a major breakthrough in the investigation. Detectives were able to recover the weapon, a 14-inch machete. They also found a blood-stained jacket and were able to track down the owner, 18-year-old Sher Singh, who'd arrived in the UK 4 months earlier from Punjab, India, on a student visa. The turning point came when detectives discovered that the 14-inch machete used in the assault was a distinctive and rare Brazilian-made weapon, available in a shop half a mile from Sunny's residence in Hounslow, West London. CCTV footage at the store showed 3 individuals purchasing that machete. All 3 buyers were tracked down. 2 of them still had their machetes at home, but the 3rd buyer didn't. And this was none other than Geeta's husband, Sunny Aulakh. Due to this, Sunny immediately became the prime suspect again. More questions arose in the mind of the authorities as they examined the evidence closely. They quickly became suspicious of Jaswant Dillon, who'd come forward as the witness. Even if he had witnessed the attack, how could he know where the murder weapon had been dumped? It finally emerged that Dillon was one of Sunny's friends, a detail that left the authorities amazed and shocked. Was their witness a killer in disguise? Authorities also discovered that the young student Sher Singh, whose jacket was retrieved from the canal with the machete, had received his student visa with Sunny's help. Not only that, Sunny had also helped Sher Singh find housing and a job after arriving in London. With all these details linking their 3 suspects, investigators finally put together how the crime had unfolded. Enraged at Geeta for filing for divorce, Sunny had recruited his friends to attack his wife while he drank at a pub in full view of CCTV cameras to set up a deliberate alibi. Sher Singh and Jaswant Dillon had waited for Geeta near the street to the childminder's house, as instructed by Sunny. Sher Singh was the one who suddenly appeared behind Geeta and barbarically attacked her with the machete, severing her hand. Dillon had been on the lookout, making sure no one was around. The pair then fled the scene, with Sher Singh dumping his bloodied clothes and the murder weapon in the Grand Union Canal in Slough. Sunny Aulakh, Sher Singh, and Jaswant Dillon were all charged with the murder of Geeta Aulakh and put on trial at the Old Bailey Courthouse in London in November 2010. Geeta's family, present at the court, held her pictures, demanding justice for her tragic demise. During the trial, Dillon claimed to barely know Sunny and that he'd innocently been taken along to the murder. But phone evidence showed that they'd been in contact before the attack and on the day itself. It also emerged that Sunny'd been involved in drug peddling and immigration scams while in the UK. He decided to recruit someone from this circle of connections to murder Geeta. In a room full of Punjabi men, he had callously offered £5,000 to anyone who was willing to carry out the attack. It was in this room where Sher Singh, who struck the fatal blows with his machete, had volunteered to do the deed. Sunny's behavior during the trial underscored his callous and cunning nature. He often looked up at the gallery where Geeta's devastated family sat, smiling and grinning at them, displaying an utter lack of remorse. Even when reprimanded by the judge, his demeanor remained detached, showing a disregard for the severity of his actions. Throughout the trial, the 3 men claimed their innocence. Sunny even described Geeta as his first love and said he had nothing to do with her murder. On the basis of all evidence presented in court, Judge David Paget remarked, "It's hard to imagine a more cold-blooded way of killing someone." On December 3, 2010, Sunny was convicted of masterminding Geeta's murder and was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 28 years. Sher Singh, who wielded the machete, and Jaswant Dillon, who acted as a lookout, also received life sentences with a minimum term of 22 years. About 8 years after the conviction, on August 28, 2018, Sunny Aulakh and Sher Singh were repatriated to India under a prisoner transfer program. They were moved to the Patiala Central Jail in Punjab to serve the remainder of their life sentences. Sunny had 20 more years, and Sher Singh had 14 more years before parole eligibility. In a shocking turn of events, they were granted early release just a few months later in 2019. They showcased their liberty on Facebook, celebrating with large gatherings of men and proudly taking photos with smiling companions. In one video, Sonny was seen firing shots from a pistol into the sky at an outdoor event. One of the photos showed him standing smugly next to a marijuana field. Back in London, Geeta's sister, 41-year-old Anita Shin, expressed her frustration and outrage at the murderer's swift release in India, wondering about the purpose of the trial and high-security imprisonment in Britain. Geeta's family, already mourning her loss, were even more distressed that her killers were roaming freely. Anita lodged a complaint with the Ministry of Justice, and after initial skepticism, officials were astounded to uncover the truth. She received a letter from Justice Secretary Robert Buckland apologizing for the profound distress caused by the premature release of the duo. He informed her that he'd raised the issue with Indian government officials and reassured her that measures were being taken to ensure the culprits complete their remaining sentences. Although Sonny and Sher Singh are reported to have been reincarcerated, there's no proper record of their detention or whereabouts. According to some sources, the criminals are often given weekend furloughs to visit friends and family. Other sources state that they merely need to check in at the prison daily before being allowed to move freely in society. Sonny's strong connections in Punjab and influential relatives might have facilitated his liberty in India by potentially using money to influence the situation. Anita Shin expressed concerns about the still-at-large murderers, questioning whether she should wait for Sonny to come to England with a fake passport and potentially harm them before actions taken. She emphasized his prior illegal entry into Britain and the fear of it happening again, and criticized the UK government for sending back murderers to freedom. A British government spokesperson acknowledged the reports as deeply troubling, requesting urgent communication with Indian authorities regarding the issue. However, the Indian Justice Department has not responded to these requests yet. The tragic case of Geeta Aulakh unveils the depths of human cruelty orchestrated by her possessive and jealous husband, Harpreet Sonny Aulakh. His callous demeanor in court reflected a deeply ingrained chauvinistic mindset and a willingness to take a life for personal gains. Virendra Sharma, an MP of the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, warned against linking this to cultural roots, stating it was the actions of individuals and not reflective on their background or culture. Geeta's family, especially her children, are profoundly affected. Her mother, Nardesh Shin, has vowed to uphold Geeta's legacy by nurturing her sons with love and respect. This case serves as a somber reminder to combat toxic traits and protect the innocent, hoping justice prevails. Geeta's memory should inspire a collective resolve to fight violence and misogyny at every step.
I prayed and I prayed to bring my baby home, just bring my baby home to me. I knew something had happened. I was getting ready to go into work. Someone texted me, call the police, Nikki's gone.
17-year-old Nikki Kuhnhausen was proud of her identity as a transgender. She lived away from her mother, Lisa Woods, but she was always in touch with her. On June 6, 2019, Nikki failed to answer a call from her mother. When Lisa didn't hear back from Nikki, she could tell right away that something was terribly wrong. She contacted the police, but weeks passed by with no sign of Nikki. Each day that passed meant the chances to find Nikki alive and well were decreasing. There were no leads until investigators discovered a Snapchat conversation Nikki had had with a man. What was the mysterious chat about? What happened to Nikki? Vancouver, located in the Pacific Northwest, is a vibrant city known for its natural beauty and urban charm. With stunning mountains, lush forests, and the sparkling Pacific Ocean, it offers a perfect blend of outdoor adventures and city living. Diverse neighborhoods, bustling farmers markets, and a lively arts scene add to its appeal. Vancouver's temperate climate allows for year-round enjoyment of its picturesque surroundings. Whether exploring parks, hiking trails, or enjoying the waterfront, living in Vancouver promises a fulfilling and dynamic lifestyle. It was here in Vancouver that flyers started popping up everywhere in town in June of 2019. The flyers read, "Have you seen me?" along with some pictures of the missing person, Nikki Kuhnhausen. Nicholas Kuhnhausen, born on July 6, 2001 in Vancouver, Washington, decided to embrace her true identity as transgender while in the 6th grade and began using the name Nikki. This journey of self-discovery was supported and accepted by her mother, Lisa Woods, who stood by her side throughout the process. From a very young age, Nikki knew who she was and never had any doubts about her identity. Nikki was described by her friends as cheerful, caring, and full of energy. She was a natural performer and had an infectious enthusiasm for life. Nikki's vibrant personality made people gravitate to her, and she quickly became a cherished friend in her social circles. Nikki was undoubtedly popular, especially known for her multiple talents. Among her many talents, her makeup skills stood out, and she was particularly admired for them among the cheerleaders. Her love for makeup extended beyond personal interest. She dreamt of pursuing a career as a stylist for her idol, the famous singer Nicki Minaj. Nicki's admiration for Nicki Minaj's music was evident, and she often showcased her passion by posting TikToks where she lip-synced along to the artist's popular songs. While Nikki had many friends, Lisa Woods, her mother, knew her better than anyone else. And surely, Nikki was also very loyal to her mom. Even though Nikki was just 17, she'd been living independently away from her parents for a while. Nikki lived a transient lifestyle, staying at different friends' place, so Lisa didn't always know where she was. But Nikki always made sure to check in with her mom. However, they talked every day, sometimes more than once, and their mother-daughter relationship was different from what most people have. It was almost like their roles were switched. Nikki would check in on her mother, who had struggled with substance abuse and mental health issues in the past. Lisa had been working at Walmart for about 6 years and would talk to Nikki once a day before starting her shift. One night, when Lisa's messages to Nikki went unanswered, she had a feeling that something was wrong. According to her friends, Nikki left their apartment in the early morning hours around 6 a.m. She told her roommates that she was going to meet someone she'd been communicating with on Snapchat. The day went by, but Nikki never came back. As there was no sign of her even at the end of the day, her friends grew increasingly concerned. They attempted to reach out to her through various means, but received no response. Minutes were quickly turning into hours, and soon enough days since Nikki went missing. Lisa's attempts to reach out to her daughter through calls and texts remained unanswered. Despite the worry and uncertainty, Lisa clung to hope, praying that Nikki would suddenly return home with some wild excuse for her absence. Lisa reached out to Nikki's best friend, Taylor Watts. Taylor had a long history with Nikki, having known her since they were children. Feeling equally worried and helpless, Taylor teamed up with another friend named Ariel. Together, they spent their evenings driving around Vancouver, desperately searching for any sign or clue that could lead them to Nikki's whereabouts. As the days went by and June 10, 2019 approached, Lisa's hope began to wane. She couldn't bear to wait any longer and decided to take action. Lisa made the decision to involve the authorities, calling the police to report Nikki as missing. The news was slowly spreading among the activist groups. Nobody had heard from Nikki for days, and everyone could see that was a bad sign. According to activist Devin Davis Williamson,
when trans people go missing, they're usually found deceased.
As each day passed by, the possibility of finding Nikki in good health was beginning to fade. However, on June 19, 2019, Nikki's friend Tiffany McConnell came up with a new piece of information. She contacted police officer Brendan DeGraw and shared details about a Russian man relevant to the case. After a few days, on June 23, 2019, Lisa, Nikki's mother, called 911 and spoke with Officer Jake Carlo, stating that Nikki had used her roommate, Faith Fieldis' phone to communicate with her intended date. He was a 25-year-old construction worker, and his name was David Bogdanov. The entire police department was alert and active in the case. Detective David Jensen from the Vancouver Police Department spoke to Lisa to verify the details about the phone situation. It was then that Lisa brought up the involvement of Snapchat. Nikki had contacted David using Snapchat. It was a great lead. The next day, Detective Jensen arranged a meeting with Faith and Tiffany, and they met on June 25, 2019 to discuss and verify the details. With some pieces in place, things were looking up for the detectives. They had the suspect's name, but they needed much more than that. Snapchat is rather tricky. The messages are usually erased after they're read, and in most cases, there's no way to know more about a person unless they decide to share that information with you. So the very next day, Detective Jensen urgently contacted Snapchat for help. By now, the police had obtained a search warrant for Snapchat, and sure enough, they received what they'd hoped for. The detectives now had the geolocations from David Bogdanov's phone on the night of Nikki's disappearance. The data showed David was at his brother Stan's house and near an area south of where Nikki was staying. On June 28, 2019, it had been 22 days since Nikki's disappearance. She was nowhere to be found. Therefore, now that the detectives had all the information they required, they finally made an attempt to contact the last person who they believed had last seen her. Their attempts were initially unsuccessful. Police were unable to contact David for 3 more months. It was October 2, 2019. By now, Nikki's family and friends had lost the hope that they'd find her alive and well. Yet they wanted to know the truth and seek justice for her. So when the detectives informed them that David was finally reachable, it was the best news they'd heard in months. The detectives got in touch with their prime suspect and conducted an interview.
All right. This is Detective David Jensen with Vancouver Police, and I have with me David Bogdanov. Do I have your consent to record this conversation?
Yep. I saw her walking. I walked up to her, asked her why is she walking alone in the middle of the night, and she said that she had some big fight with her boyfriend, and she's really upset, and I was just trying to be a nice guy, you know.
Everyone wants to be a nice guy, but not all humans are as nice as they think they are. This seemed to be true for David, too. He explained to the detectives that Nikki was with them for a while and they both did some shots of vodka together. Then, while they were engaging in an intimate encounter, Nikki revealed that she was biologically male. This took David by surprise. He felt disgusted and asked Nikki to leave his vehicle immediately. Then he claimed Nikki left and he didn't see her again after that. However, it was hard to believe his story. Enough time had passed for him to come up with a plausible theory of his encounter with Nikki. But the detectives believed that there was more to the story. However, without any evidence, there was no way to charge him. Meanwhile, detectives were still trying to search for Nikki. Everyone had accepted her fate by now, so they had hoped to find her body soon if she was, in fact, dead. The search for Nikki stalled until December 9, 2019, when a hiker saw something on a remote road on Larch Mountain. As he inched closer to have a clearer look, he realized the horror of what he was actually looking at. There were human remains lying on the ground in front of him. Along with the remains, several other items were discarded, including multiple rings and a jacket. Investigators matched the rings to social media images and determined they were Nikki Kuhnhausen's. The jacket found on the mountain was also determined to have belonged to Nikki Kuhnhausen. The investigators also discovered a phone cord with strands of hair still stuck in a knot alongside the remains. Nikki had finally been found after 6 months. Her body was sent for an autopsy. Soon, the medical examiner determined the cause of death to be strangulation. Why would someone want to kill Nikki? Even if David was a suspect, what could have been the reason to end her life like that? Nikki's mother, Lisa Woods, had an answer for this. She believed that Nikki was killed because she was transgender. It was time to have a conversation with David again. The detectives knew he was hiding something, and they needed to extract that information. So they scheduled an interview with him.
All right. Do you understand that this room is being audio and video recorded? Sure. Okay. So I'm gonna get, whoops. Guess what I didn't bring it with me? Take my coat off, have my phone caps in there. All right. You're not gonna flip out on us or anything? You all right? Okay.
So far, you can see the interrogators trying to ease him into this conversation and build a rapport, but David doesn't look open to talk. He had his head down the entire time and doesn't make eye contact with the detectives. David seems reserved, but detectives can tell he's hiding something judging by his tone and body language.
What happened on that trip? That trip took about an hour round trip from Archer's house, past Arch Mountain, up some logging roads, and then back again.
Finally, since he couldn't provide any clear answers or explanations, detectives ended the interview. He was subsequently arrested for Nikki's murder. On December 17, 2019, David Bogdanoff was charged with murder in the second degree and malicious harassment.
We, the jury, find the above-named defendant guilty of the crime of murder in the second degree as charged in count 1. Verdict form count 2. We, the jury, find the above-named defendant guilty of the crime of malicious harassment.
A hate crime in Washington. He pleaded not guilty. After his arrest in Nikki Kuhnhausen's case, activists in the area were motivated to advocate for the prohibition of the trans panic defense, which involved using a victim's gender identity to justify acts of violence. The resultant law, known as Nikki's Law, received significant backing and was successfully enacted in Washington state. At David Bogdanoff's trial in August 2021 in Clark County Superior Court, he took the stand and claimed that he'd killed Nikki Kuhnhausen in self-defense. He said that when he found out she was transgendered and asked her to leave his van, she went for his gun, which frightened him so badly that he had to use force. One thing led to another, and he had to kill Nikki to save his own life. It turned out that David used the cell phone charger to kill Nikki. He testified that he'd meant to keep the cord around her shoulders to keep her away from him, but during the hustle, the cord had slipped around her neck. After leaving her body in the mountains nearby, he bought a one-way plane ticket to Ukraine and asked a friend to help him to get rid of his car, as mentioned in the trial. He came back to the US about 6 weeks afterward. David also mentioned that upon discovering her true identity, he felt disgusted and found her and other LGBTQIA+ individuals disturbing. Jurors found David Bogdanoff guilty of murder in the second degree and malicious harassment, which is a hate crime in Washington. Clark County Superior Court Judge David Gregerson could not control his emotions for the teenage child who had lost her life. He said that he was struck by the darkness in this case. On September 9, 2021, David Bogdanoff was sentenced to 20 years in prison. While Nikki lost her life, her legacy lives on through Nikki's Law, which continues to help countless individuals in the trans community. Her death served as a catalyst for change, and Nikki's Law ensured that her death was not in vain. Nikki's friend Taylor Watts said, "I want her just remembered as Nikki. Loving, caring, sweet, happy, funny. She'd make all of you laugh." Even though Nikki's gone, her family and friends can keep her memory alive. Today's case has shed light on the increasing hate crimes and violence against transgender individuals. But some questions remain unanswered. Do you believe it was a case of predation from the beginning, or did he kill her because of self-hate?
When you lose a loved one through a violent act, and there's no one charged with the crime, you often wonder if the criminal wakes up in the morning, thinks that he got away with murder.
We always hope that justice can be served quickly, but the reality is that isn't always possible.
On February 29, 1992, in the heart of San Diego, California, 84-year-old Angela Kleinsorge was found deceased in her residence at 5600 Gaines Street near Linda Vista Road. An investigation revealed that she'd been assaulted prior to being stabbed to death. Despite the identification of possible suspects, the case eventually went cold. It would take a mix of cutting-edge DNA testing and tireless detective work for Angela's cold case to experience a major break 25 years later in 2017. However, at the onset of the initial investigation, two haunting questions emerged. Who could harbor such malevolence towards an innocent, defenseless elderly woman? And what reason, if any, could there have been for taking her life in such a violent manner? In San Diego, California, a bustling community of over 1.3 million people, history and modernity blend seamlessly. Pristine beaches and rich landmarks set the stage for an engaging backdrop. Balboa Park is where the famous San Diego Zoo can be found, and is also home to numerous art galleries, artist studios, museums, and gardens. In 1992, in a seemingly safe haven within the city, Angela Kleinsorge's tragic end at 84 remains a reminder of human vulnerability even in serene settings. Angela was born as Angela Wittkamp in Mönchengladbach, Germany on June 11, 1907. She then emigrated to the United States, where she met her husband, Paul Kleinsorge. The couple moved to California, started a landscaping business, and raised their family in a modest home in the quiet San Diego suburb of Linda Vista. The couple lived the American dream alongside their daughter Hetty and their son Roland, and tried to give back to their community. The Kleinsorges were founding memories of the House of Germany at the International Cottages in Balboa Park. They took tremendous pride in their German-American heritage. Paul died in 1970. Angela continued to live at the family's home, where, as she grew older, she settled into a quiet life. She had a daily routine that included waking up at 6 a.m. for coffee and breakfast, watching soap operas, and working in her garden. She was beloved by her children, family, and friends. On the morning of February 29, 1992, Hetty Kleinsorge, who'd spoken to her mother the day before, as she regularly did, called her mother 3 times but received no response. She knew something was wrong. Hetty rushed over to her mother's home, and immediately she noticed something was amiss when she saw the garage light on and the blinds shuttered. When Hetty went inside the house, she made a grisly discovery. Her mother's body lay lifeless on the floor in her bedroom. Angela had been assaulted and stabbed several times in her neck. In a state of shock, Hetty rushed and dialed 911 to report her mother's murder. Soon, sirens rang throughout the neighborhood, and detectives from the San Diego Police Department arrived at the scene. Along with the forensic analysts, they began to examine the crime scene. According to the investigators, the killer had entered Angela's home through a window and attacked her. Based on the evidence that the killer left behind, they also found foreign DNA in the house, though information regarding where they found it and the nature of the DNA was never released to the public. It was only later revealed that foreign DNA was discovered at the crime scene in the form of unidentified genetic material, adding a new dimension to the investigation. At the time, authorities said regular DNA testing didn't match anyone in a statewide offender database. As time went on, the case remained unsolved due to the lack of leads, and eventually it went cold. However, hope reignited when, in July of 2016, the San Diego Police Department and the District Attorney's Office submitted the case to the Department of Justice with a request for familial DNA testing. Familial DNA searches allow investigators to search offender databases with wider parameters, identifying people who are likely to be close relatives of the person who may have committed a crime. When the DNA from Angela's murder was tested, it showed a high probability that a certain individual named Jeffrey Falls was the murderer. However, the familial DNA typing results also showed that there was a high likelihood that Angela's murderer could also be a brother of Jeffrey Falls. Through further investigation, it was determined that Jeffrey Falls had one living brother. SDPD was able to obtain DNA samples from the living brother, and he was eliminated as a suspect. Once his brother was eliminated, police were now sure that Jeffrey was the culprit, so they looked further into his past to see whether they could uncover any more evidence against him. They learned that in 1992, when Angela had been murdered, Falls had been 28 and had been her neighbor at the time, information that only further strengthened their suspicions. However, when they looked up Falls to make an arrest, they learned he died in 2006 at the age of 43 in a motorcycle accident, hindering their quest for justice. To be sure of his involvement, SDPD then received tissue samples from the coroner to cross-check against the sample from the crime scene. The crime lab was able to obtain a partial DNA profile from the deceased suspect's tissue that matched the crime scene sample, pointing to Falls as the murderer. The likelihood ratio for kinship between the crime scene sample and Falls was in the quadrillions, further evidence that investigators had solved the case. The results of this testing have brought a measure of closure to the victim's family more than 2 decades after her murder, said San Diego District Attorney Bonnie Dumanis. While familial DNA testing remains fairly rare in the U.S., this is an excellent example of how law enforcement can use the science as a way to propel an investigation forward and solve more crimes. District Attorney Dumanis and SDPD Chief Zimmerman led the press conference, joined by a slew of other top-level homicide investigators, cold case detectives, and forensic experts. Zimmerman praised the tireless work of cold case investigators, including now-retired Reserve Detective Holly Irwin. The case had sat idle for over 2 decades. It would still be unsolved if it wasn't for the tenacious and persistent efforts of now-retired Detective Holly Irwin, who became a reserve detective in order to continue working this case. Their relentless pursuit of justice will now allow the Kleinsorge family to close a very painful yet important chapter in their family history. According to Dumanis, the familial DNA testing results have brought a measure of closure to the Kleinsorge family. Although a rare procedure, Dumanis touted the science as a way to propel an investigation forward and solve more crimes. Angela's surviving daughter, Hetty, and son, Ronald Kleinsorge, attended the announcement. Hetty spoke about what this means for her family, pained for so long by her mother's murder. According to Hetty,
when you lose a loved one through a violent act, and there's no one charged with the crime, you often wonder if the criminal wakes up in the morning, thinks that he got away with murder, or if he even gives it a second thought. After 25 years, we have our answer.
While they have only partial closure, at least they know Mr. Falls no longer thinks he got away with the rape and murder of their mother. She thanked law enforcement for their work, especially Detective Irwin. It's through her dedication to solve her mother's case that they had the press conference. "Thank you, Holly," she added. As we close the pages on this unsettling chapter in the true crime saga of Angela Kleinsorge, we're left with strong feelings and unanswered questions. This story is about seeking justice, closure, and the determination of those looking for answers. The case of Jeffrey Falls, the man who wrought unspeakable horrors upon Angela, invites reflection on the very nature of justice. With Jeffrey unable to answer for his crime, the question remains, why did he commit this horrific act?
Ambulance, is the patient breathing?
He's been stabbed in the chest.
Okay, is he breathing?
Just about, yes.
Okay, is he awake?
He is, but he's still just about awake. Liam.
Tell me exactly what happened.
He just walked in the house and this lad jumped up and stabbed him.
He was always a bit of a mad guy, to be fair. Like, you never really, you'd see him for like 2 days and then he'd disappear again.
On the 18th of July, 2019, 18-year-old Liam Gray learned that he was a new dad, and so he made plans of starting a family with his partner. Part of his plan was to leave his home in Mansfield, Nottinghamshire, and relocate to Birmingham. The relocation was scheduled for August 2nd, 2019. So on August 1st, 2019, Liam Gray and 2 of his closest friends went out to drink, celebrate, and to say their last goodbyes. However, by the end of their celebrations and drinks, Liam had a knife in his chest and was battling for life in a hospital. Who could have stabbed Liam? And most importantly, why would anyone stab him? Mansfield is a bustling market town that serves as the administrative hub of Nottinghamshire's Mansfield district. Mansfield has a population of 110,000 as of the 2021 census. However, while its size is notable, Mansfield also carries a concerning reputation. It's earned the unfortunate distinction of being considered the most dangerous major town in Nottinghamshire. Out of 236 towns, villages, and cities, Mansfield finds itself among the top 20 most dangerous locations. In 2019, the overall crime rate reached 124 crimes per 1,000 residents in Mansfield, significantly higher than the Nottinghamshire average. This places Mansfield at the 25th spot among the most dangerous towns across England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Nevertheless, the residents are good-natured people. This is the town where Liam Gray and his family lived. Liam Gray, also known as Liam Peters, was born in 2001 in Mansfield, Nottinghamshire, United Kingdom. His mother, Joanne Peters, showered him with love and care that influenced his teenage years. Growing up in Mansfield, Liam was fortunate to have a close and affectionate bond with his granddad, John Barry, whom he lovingly called Pops. Sibling dynamics are often colored by clashes, and Liam's relationship with his elder sister, Paige Peters, was no exception.
It was a nightmare to me. Obviously, he was my little brother, and we just clashed so much. But we was really close as well. I was like his second mum, I think, because my mum had me quite young and Liam quite young. Me and Liam was really close growing up.
Despite occasional clashes with Paige, Liam's connection with her remained steadfast. Music was a central part of Liam's life, and his kitchen often transformed into his dance floor. With the Backstreet Boys' I Want It That Way playing in the background, Liam would dance around with carefree abandon, showcasing his joyful and exuberant spirit. However, life wasn't without its challenges. Liam faced struggles at school. He wasn't cut out for academics. Liam's life was characterized by the deep friendships he formed, particularly with his best friend Reese.
I've known him all my life. We grew up together, went to school together and everything. We were just a bit crazy, to be fair. Everyone would be like, oh, Liam and Reese are together again. As little lads, we used to fight with each other. Get ready. We'd fall out, but then we'd be best mates again anyway. He's mint. I loved him, I did. There was a special place in my heart for that lad.
However, Liam's story took a surprising twist when he introduced Jonathan Treadgold of Kent Close Worksop, known also as Joe, into his circle of friends. Jonathan, who was the same age as Liam, grew up in foster homes and had a criminal past that often tended towards crime. Despite their differing backgrounds, Liam's compassionate nature led him to befriend Jonathan.
Do you know what? When I first met him, I thought he was alright, to be fair. He was a good lad. And we all just ended up getting on. It was kind of like, I don't know, Three Musketeers.
Besides great friends, he had a good partner too. His relationship with his partner, Sean, was remarkable.
He used to live on the same street that we lived on, but then I think he ended up being taken into care.
On July 18th, 2019, Liam's partner Sean gave birth to their daughter, Isla. At just 18 years old, the joy of fatherhood illuminated Liam's life, and he fully embraced the responsibilities that came with it. He wanted to replicate the love and care his family had shown him to his daughter. As Liam embraced fatherhood, he decided to move to Birmingham to better care for his daughter. He was determined to build a better life for Isla and himself.
Him moving out was always a big thing. He wanted to move out, wanted to get my own place. So and then he can do what he wants and he can have it looking how he wants it and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean?
Liam made plans to leave for Birmingham on August 2nd, 2019. But before he left, he wanted to have one last day with his friends and say his goodbyes.
We planned to go to the pub, have a few drinks before Liam left to go to his new house. He was going literally the next day.
So on August 1st, 2019, Liam went drinking with Reese and Jonathan Treadgold at a house on Gladstone Street, Mansfield. Soon the friends moved from the house to a local pub. As it got late, the boys returned to the Gladstone Street house. Little did Liam know that this evening would forever alter the course of his life. Around the evening of August 1st, 2019, the emergency services of the United Kingdom, 999, received an emotional emergency call from John Barry, Liam's grandfather. John's emotional voice told the emergency services,
Ambulance, is the patient breathing?
He's been stabbed in the chest.
Okay, is he breathing?
Just about, yes.
Okay, is he awake?
He is, but he's still just about awake. Liam.
Tell me exactly what's happened.
He just walked in the house and this lad jumped up and stabbed him.
Okay, you're doing really, really well. Now, do you know who the person is who stabbed him?
Yes,
What?
John Treadgold.
John
Treadgold.
Liam had been stabbed and he needed an ambulance. John Barry provided first aid while waiting for an ambulance. Not long after, the paramedics arrived. They fought to keep Liam alive as they rushed him to Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham. Despite their efforts, Liam succumbed to a single stab wound to his chest, leaving his family and friends shattered. The promising young life that had just become a father was tragically cut short. Following the incident, the police were called to the house and they began investigating what went wrong. The investigation kicked into gear as the police sought answers, piecing together the sequence of events that unfolded. The trio of friends had convened for what would tragically be their final gathering at a house on Gladstone Street belonging to Grandpa John Barry. Starting with drinks in the garden, the trio's playful mood took a grim turn when they decided to extend their evening at a local pub, leading to a heated argument. The conflict was triggered by a video from Jonathan's sister's boyfriend. In the heat of the moment, Liam threatened Jonathan's sister's boyfriend, which caused an intense face-off between Liam and Jonathan. The group eventually returned to the Gladstone Street residence, each member arriving separately. Jonathan, arriving before the others, laid his hands on a carving knife from the house. The fateful moment arrived when Liam and Reese followed suit, joining Jonathan at the house. In a matter of minutes, the volatile situation reached its breaking point. With a swift, shocking motion, Jonathan thrust the knife into Liam's chest, striking his heart with a devastating blow. After stabbing Liam, Jonathan ran out from the back door, announced to John Barry and Reese that he'd stabbed Liam, and fled the scene.
John's come running out, I've stabbed him, I've killed him. I thought, shut up, no you haven't. And he ran off, and that's when I was like, okay, he might have actually done something here. I've gone in, and Liam stood there and he's got a handful of tea towels off of Pops' radiator, stuck into his chest and gone, ring an ambulance. And I pulled my phone out and I didn't know what to do, so I rang the ambulance and gave my phone to Pop.
John Barry rushed in and saw a blood-stained large knife inside the kitchen, and when he entered the dining room, he saw Liam standing behind a sofa, clutching a tea towel to his chest and his white t-shirt stained with blood. Liam requested assistance in calling an ambulance. This was when John Barry made the 999 call while providing first aid to his grandson. Jonathan ran to his mother, who was visiting a friend. He confessed to them that he'd stabbed and killed Liam. Jonathan was soon apprehended by the police.
He stabbed me! Tried stabbing me! At this moment in time, you're under arrest on suspicion of GBH. You have to say anything, mate. 100% people mention one question, something which they try and quote anything you do say, we have any evidence. Do you understand?
During his police interview, which was conducted by Superintendent Kevin Broadhead of Nottinghamshire Police, Jonathan claimed that Liam attacked him first and that he was only defending himself. He painted Liam as a bully who'd previously attacked him and inflicted injuries as well. But the evidence showed something different. The Nottinghamshire Police pieced together the puzzle, relying on crucial pieces of evidence, including CCTV footage and eyewitness accounts.
We received a call from a local business owner who had seen something suspicious. A male that actually climbed into the rear yard of a local sandwich shop, and he was challenged by the owner. It was through things he was telling the sandwich shop owner, making some sort of allegation of he'd been involved in some serious incidents, involved in some crime. Immediately, our call dispatchers linked that back to the scene that had already taken place at Gladstone Street.
Jonathan's initial claims of self-defense crumbled under the weight of the evidence presented. Despite his assertion that Liam was a violent aggressor, the facts told a different story. The proof showed a fight that started with a disagreement and got worse until it became deadly. CCTV footage captured Jonathan, Liam, and Reese walking to a nearby store to purchase alcohol before returning to the residence. Other footage also caught him fleeing from the scene after stabbing Jonathan. The police also interrogated Liam's best friend, Reese, who witnessed the event, and John Barry, who tried to save Liam. At the end of their investigation, Jonathan was charged with murder. However, for Liam's mom, Joanne, the heartbreak wasn't over, as she was told that Jonathan would be tried as a juvenile, even though he was 18. In February 2020, the wheels of justice began to turn as Jonathan Threadgold faced trial for the chilling murder of his friend Liam Gray in Nottingham Crown Court. After that, lawyers took turns presenting their arguments, and jurors intently listened, all in an attempt to unravel the complex web of events that led to that fateful day. Jonathan's decision to remain silent during his trial puzzled many. Throughout the legal proceedings, he displayed disruptive behavior and adamantly refused to take the witness stand. His belief seemed to be that by keeping quiet, he could somehow evade the consequences of his actions. Yet justice remained steadfast. The jurors, guided by their keen insight and dedication, saw through Jonathan's attempt to deceive through silence. The weight of the evidence spoke volumes, transcending the need for words. In February of 2020, following thoughtful deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous decision. Jonathan Threadgold was pronounced guilty for the murder of Liam. As the judge pronounced the guilty verdict, Jonathan's appearance remained unchanged. When queried about his thoughts on the verdict, his response was simple, just one word: sound. However, for the family of Liam, the emotions were written on their faces. When the judge announced that Jonathan was guilty, many of them shouted, "Yes!" Consequently, Jonathan was sentenced to life in prison with a stipulated minimum of 16 years. Addressing Jonathan, Judge Gregory Dickinson stated, "Your actions were driven by anger, alcohol, and malice rather than fear." But beyond the minimum term, Judge Dickinson reminded all present that Jonathan's fate was not sealed with the minimum sentence. He emphasized there is a possibility of Jonathan serving a period longer than 16 years in custody, as he won't be considered for release by the parole board until he's deemed to no longer pose a risk to the public. Following the trial, Joanne Peters, Liam's mother, shared, "I believe the sentence falls short of what's deserved, though there's little more to add." Joanne and her friends wore T-shirts that featured Liam's image on the front. Loved ones gathered outside to respond to the jury's decision, and Joanne read a statement that began with, "The pain we've endured is something no family should bear. Our lives have been forever shattered." Addressing the courtroom, she expressed the heartache that no punishment could ever truly cover the immense void left by their loss. The chance to lay eyes on Liam or to witness his name illuminating their phones had been abruptly stolen from them by an unrelenting tragedy. However, she extended gratitude to all who had supported the family during their ordeal and those who had worked tirelessly to try to save Liam's life. Adding her perspective, Liam's sister, 22-year-old Paige Peters, shared cherished memories of her younger sibling. "In my recollections, he'll forever be my little brother," she said. Paige portrayed Liam as a constant presence during times of need. Paige further noted that Jonathan's ill-conceived notion of evading accountability demonstrated a lack of remorse for the grave consequences of his actions. While a notable reduction in knife-related crimes has been achieved in Nottinghamshire, defying the national trend, it's believed that even one victim of knife crime is unacceptable. Knife crime is treated with utmost seriousness by Nottinghamshire police, and it's firmly believed by both us and the communities we serve that our streets should be devoid of weapons. In 2022, Liam's mother, Joanne Peters, recounted the distressing moments when she was informed of her son's murder in the documentary Britain's Deadliest Kids. During a heartfelt moment on the Discovery Plus show, Joanne shared a precious moment when she expressed her love to Liam while Liam was being taken to the hospital. She hoped he heard her words because that was their final conversation before he passed away. Joanne became emotional as she recalled the moment when she knew something bad had happened.
They didn't even have to say anything, I just knew, and I think I said to them, "He's gone, hasn't he?" And they said, "Yeah, we regret to tell you, that he has gone, yeah, he's passed away." My heart just shattered.
He will still be a young man when he's released from prison, but my son is no longer with us, she cried. We've missed out on seeing our son, brother, and father achieve his dreams due to a minor video-related argument, leaving us heartbroken. Joanne revealed that Jonathan remained quiet, offering no reasons for his actions. Some crime analysts and detectives have suggested that Jonathan killed Liam out of jealousy, that he had his life figured out and was about to start a family, while Joe still got into trouble with the police occasionally. Liam Gray's story showed how friendships and laughter can be replaced by anger and tragedy in the twinkling of an eye. What do you think of Jonathan's 16-year sentence? Is it adequate, or should he have been given a tougher sentence? On May 30th, 1999, 66-year-old Angela Spence Shaw did not turn up for a job at Peckham's Greenhouse in Little Compton, Rhode Island. This was highly unusual and raised concern among her co-workers, especially since Angela lived alone. Her best friend and coworker, Sarah Jane, decided to visit her and check on her. When Sarah reached Angela's house, the door was open, and she heard water running and the sound of an electric motor upstairs. Feeling unsettled, she followed the sounds to the second floor. But what Sarah found would haunt her forever. Angela was fully submerged in her bathtub with a plugged-in hairdryer in the water. Did Angela electrocute herself? Or was there a more disturbing explanation behind her death? Today's story takes us to the beautiful coastal town of Little Compton in Newport County, Rhode Island. Situated on the eastern coast of the United States, Little Compton is bordered by the Atlantic Ocean to the south and the Saguenay River to the west. As of 2020, the population of Little Compton was 3,600. Named after Little Compton in Warwickshire, England, the town is a serene and quiet place with many natural and historic wonders. It attracts lots of visitors, especially in the summer months. Little Compton has historically been so peaceful that since 1965, for more than 30 years, the town never recorded a single murder. However, that all changed in 1999 when the total crime offenses for the state spiked by 2.3% over the previous year. This was the town where 66-year-old Angela Spence Shaw lived alone. Angela Spence Shaw was born in 1933 in North London, England. She found love at an early age and got married. Family was at the heart of Angela's life, so when her husband Peter Van Cleve Shaw suggested they move to the United States, Angela didn't hesitate for a second. After moving to their new home, the couple set up and ran the Campus Shop, a bookstore on the Wheaton College campus in Norton, Massachusetts. Angela had 2 sons, Gerard and Justin, and the family lived happily. Tragedy struck when Peter died, but the widowed Angela found love once again and married a second time. With her new husband, Bernard Spence, she continued running the Campus Shop. In 1980, the couple decided to sell the shop and move to Little Compton, Rhode Island. Shortly after that, Bernard too passed away. Despite the challenges of being widowed again, Angela carried herself with grace. She was a devoted mother to her 2 sons and soon became a grandmother to 4 lovely grandkids. Her love and care extended beyond her family to the local community in Little Compton as well. Angela would frequently volunteer to help the needy and was known as a passionate painter and birdwatcher. But what truly set Angela apart was her unwavering love for nature. She enjoyed gardening and spending time outside. So deep was her passion for gardening that, even at the age of 66, she happily took on a job at Peckham's greenhouse. It was here that she became friends with her colleague, Sarah Jane Craig. Angela loved her job so much that she never missed a day of work. So, on May 30th, 1999, when Angela didn't show up at the greenhouse, her co-workers were understandably worried. Her friend Sarah Jane decided to check on her at home. Little did the woman know what horror awaited her at Angela's house. When Sarah arrived at Angela's house, she noticed that the front door was unlocked, which was unusual. Concerned, she entered the house. The first floor was under renovation at the time, but everything appeared relatively normal, except for the sound of water running upstairs and the faint hum of an electric motor. As Sarah followed the noise up the stairs, what she saw traumatized her completely. Angela was submerged in the bathtub on the second floor. She was wearing just a pink nightshirt, and it was evident that something terrible had occurred. Next to Angela in the bathtub, an electric hairdryer was left running in the water. Shocked and disoriented, Sarah collected herself enough to unplug the hairdryer, step outside, and call the police. Authorities from the Rhode Island State Police and the Little Compton Police Department quickly arrived at the scene. Little Compton hadn't witnessed a murder since 1965, and the police department had only 9 officers. So, a crime of this magnitude was shocking even to them. The initial scan of the house revealed no signs of forced entry. Despite having valuable items in her house, nothing appeared to have been stolen. Angela's wallet, containing $500 in cash, lay untouched on the bedroom dresser, and her jewelry remained undisturbed. So the police ruled out burglary. However, the presence of the hairdryer in the bathtub indicated that Angela's death was not accidental. She'd suffered severe blunt force trauma to her head, rendering her unrecognizable from injuries. And it was clear that the attack had begun in the bedroom adjacent to the bathroom where her body was found. The bedroom bore haunting evidence of a violent attack. The bed and the carpet were stained with puddles of blood, creating a trail leading to the bathroom. The bedroom furniture and walls also had bloodstains, and so did the door frame of the bathroom. The bed had been moved away from the wall and stripped of linens, and a blood-stained pillow lay nearby. The police were determined to know what had happened to this well-respected senior resident of their community. They sent Angela's body to forensics for an autopsy, hoping for some answers. The autopsy results revealed a horrifying account of Angela's death. She'd been sexually assaulted, as proved by the bodily fluids found in her body. There were signs of electrocution as well, but the main causes of death were determined to be blunt force trauma and drowning. Angela's attacker had subjected her to further horror, stomping on her and breaking several bones, adding to the already terrible nature of the crime. Wanting to unmask this violent criminal, the police checked the database for any registered sex offenders in the area. They found one who had a history of violent offenses, but when questioned, the suspect willingly gave a DNA sample to clear his name, and after testing, he was eliminated from the investigation. Then, police looked back on the last murder in Little Compton. Back in 1965, a local man had stalked and murdered a babysitter by attacking her head with a rock. To everyone's shock, it emerged that the man responsible for the murder had been released and was living with his parents near Angela's home. The police initiated a 2-day search to locate this ex-convict. Surprisingly, he cooperated and willingly provided a DNA sample for testing, but it didn't match the evidence from Angela's case, so he was also eliminated as a suspect. As the search for Angela's killer continued, the peaceful town of Little Compton was marred by apprehension and uncertainty. But the police didn't give up. They wanted to ensure that Little Compton's first murder case in over 30 years would not go unpunished. Police decided to revisit Angela's residence to re-examine the crime scene. They recovered some footprints near the bedroom and put the evidence in a box. They also searched the first floor that was undergoing construction. That was when the police noticed a hole in the wall covered up by a tarp. The hole was big enough for the killer to have gained entry into the house. By speaking to Angela's neighbors, investigators discovered that a local construction company had been working on the property for nearly 3 months, employing about 30 workers. But only 2 of those workers, who had helped demolish the wall, knew about the tarp-covered hole. One of them was promptly ruled out, as he had a rock-solid alibi for the time of the murder. The focus then shifted to the other worker, 23-year-old Jeremy Motika, who lived just across the state line in Fall River, Massachusetts. And despite his angelic appearance, Jeremy had a criminal record, having once been charged with kidnapping and assaulting a woman in Massachusetts. With a new suspect in sight, police worked quickly to locate and question Jeremy. On May 31st, 1999, the Rhode Island State Police visited Jeremy's home to interview him. His girlfriend, Patricia Rogalin, was also present at the time. Initial inquiries didn't reveal anything suspicious. Jeremy bore no visible injuries and seemed helpful and polite. He stated that he'd been working until 3:30 on May 29th. After returning home, he'd spent the evening drinking beer at a neighbor's house and socializing with other guests until midnight. He claimed he'd stayed home all night, going straight to bed after the gathering. On May 30th, he'd spent time with his girlfriend, Patricia Rogalin, at her parents' house in Cape Cod. Patricia confirmed this, but noted that he'd appeared severely hungover and spent much of the day in bed. They'd driven back from Cape Cod shortly before the police arrived. However, as the police dug deeper in follow-up interviews, Jeremy's account began to change. He added new details, which were inconsistent and erratic. Also, while the neighbor confirmed that Jeremy was at his house from 6 p.m. to midnight on May 29th, his whereabouts from midnight to 9 a.m. on May 30th, when Angela was murdered, were unknown. A crucial turn in the investigation came when a co-worker of Jeremy's contacted the police. The co-worker revealed that Jeremy had been displaying unusual behavior at work and telling everyone the police were trying to frame him for Angela's murder due to his prior arrest. The co-worker had tried to reassure Jeremy not to worry, since they worked on the first floor and the murder occurred on the second floor. It was then that Jeremy had admitted to using the bathroom on the second floor. The co-worker recounted another troubling detail. Jeremy had seen an evidence box labeled shoe prints that the police had collected from the crime scene. Soon after that, Jeremy was overheard on the phone, instructing his girlfriend to dispose of his work boots at her parents' place in Cape Cod. Although the police strongly suspected Jeremy, they needed conclusive physical evidence to charge him. On June 9, 1999, during another interview, the police requested a DNA sample from Jeremy. Unaware that he'd left his bodily fluid at the crime scene, Jeremy willingly agreed to provide a sample. Forensics teamed up with a private lab called Bode Technology to use a method called polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, to test the samples instead of the generally approved DNA testing methods. The analysis confirmed a match. However, when confronted with the evidence, Jeremy came up with far-fetched explanations. He claimed to have made love with his girlfriend before coming to work and had used Angela's bathtub to clean up afterward. However, this explanation and his claim of being innocent was not taken seriously, given the circumstances of the case. On June 24, 1999, 23-year-old Jeremy Motika was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and first-degree assault. On May 4, 2000, Jeremy's defense team filed a motion requesting a pretrial hearing to determine the reliability, relevance, and admissibility of the DNA evidence. They asked the court to stop the state from using DNA evidence in the trial. They argued that the court had only allowed one type of DNA test, called RFLP, but not the type called PCR that was used in this case. The defense also claimed that the state had not given them enough information about the DNA tests done by Bode Labs, which made it hard to question Bode's witness. However, following a pretrial hearing that lasted several days, the defense's motion was dismissed. On January 23, 2001, the trial justice issued a written decision maintaining that the DNA evidence tested by the PCR method was admissible in court. In February 2001, Jeremy was charged in court for sexually assaulting and murdering Angela Spence Shaw. During his trial, Jeremy maintained his innocence, claiming that the police were framing him due to his prior arrest. The prosecution noted that Jeremy knew that Angela lived alone, and he exploited this knowledge while heavily intoxicated on the night of May 29, 1999. According to the prosecutors, Jeremy drove back to Angela's home late at night and entered through the hole in the wall. He physically attacked and sexually assaulted her, and then tried to remove the evidence by staging the scene to resemble an accident. To dismantle Jeremy's claims of innocence, the prosecution called on many witnesses to testify against Jeremy. First on the witness stand was Dr. Elizabeth Laposada, the chief medical examiner for the state of Rhode Island, who conducted the autopsy on Angela's body. She detailed the extensive and horrifying injuries suffered by Angela, both visible bruises and internal wounds. She also spoke about injuries to Angela's intimate areas, indicating signs of forced sexual intercourse. She noted that DNA from bodily fluids was found in Angela's body. Furthermore, Dr. Laposada revealed that Angela was still alive when she was submerged in the bathtub after enduring physical beatings and sexual assault. She emphasized that Angela had been conscious enough to feel pain throughout the ordeal, subjecting her to immense suffering. Next, Kelly Stokes, a neighbor of Jeremy in Fall River, testified that he'd hung out with Jeremy and some friends until about 1:30 a.m. on the night of the murder. They drank rum and beer and smoked marijuana. As Stokes was heading home, Jeremy invited her to go with them, but she declined. Jeremy's girlfriend, Patricia Rogalin, testified that on May 28, 1999, she traveled to Falmouth on Cape Cod with her son and other family members to spend the Memorial Day weekend with her parents. Jeremy chose to stay behind in their Fall River home, reluctant to face holiday traffic. According to Patricia, on Saturday, May 29, 1999, after Jeremy returned home from work, she had multiple telephone conversations with him. These discussions began in the late afternoon and continued sporadically into the evening. Their final conversation was around 10 p.m. Patricia stated that during these phone calls, she and Jeremy got into heated arguments. Moreover, though Jeremy's speech was coherent, she observed signs indicated that Jeremy had been drinking. She confirmed that on the morning of Sunday, May 30th, 1999, around 8:30 a.m., Jeremy had called her to say he was driving down to Cape Cod. Upon arriving in Falmouth between 9:30 and 10 a.m., he vomited and spent the entire day in bed sleeping, looking tired and hungover. Patricia testified that after the police had questioned the pair on May 31st, Jeremy had seemed particularly interested in what she'd told the police. She also dismissed Jeremy's absurd claim that his DNA in Angela's bathroom was from cleaning up after they'd made love. Patricia testified that they never made love in the morning before work, preferring to do it at night. She also said that Jeremy would always clean himself later using baby wipes. During the trial, Jeremy did not dispute that the bodily fluid found in Angela's body was his. Instead, the defense argued that the DNA evidence had been planted there by a third party. Jeremy testified that, in addition to providing a blood sample, he'd also provided a bodily fluid sample to the state police on June 9, 1999. He named Detective Tella as the person who'd collected this sample in a parking lot and used the same to frame him for murder. However, Detective Tella denied these claims, stating that no such exchange had taken place and Jeremy had never asked for a bodily fluid sample. Furthermore, Jeremy himself had never mentioned this incident in any of his post-arrest statements. Superior Court Judge Roger Thompson handed down the maximum penalty to Jeremy, emphasizing his lack of remorse and labeling him the personification of evil. On April 27, 2001, Jeremy was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, despite his claims of innocence. Angela's death left her 2 children and grandchildren in deep sadness. Her sons were especially haunted by how much their gentle mother had suffered alone. Her warmth and wisdom had touched everyone's lives, and her death left a great void. She was missed greatly by her co-workers and the Little Compton community at large. Jeremy filed 2 appeals challenging the verdict, which were denied. Eventually, his 3rd appeal reached the Supreme Court. In his appeal, Jeremy challenged several rulings made by the trial justice and questioned the credibility of the methods used by Bode Labs when testing DNA. He believed that the trial judge was unfair in not advising the jury about the possibility of a lesser offense, like voluntary manslaughter from reduced mental capacity. He also disputed the appropriateness of a life sentence without parole. Nevertheless, in 2014, Jeremy's attempt to overturn his conviction was denied. Records indicate that Jeremy, now 48 years old, is currently incarcerated at the Rhode Island Maximum Security Prison in Cranston, Providence County. Angela Spence Shaw's story shows how elderly people who live alone can be dangerously vulnerable to the whims of a killer or psychopath. Angela only wanted to renovate her house, but the person she trusted took undue advantage to attack her in her own bedroom. Do you think that justice was served for Angela? Do you agree with Jeremy's claims of innocence? On the morning of February 13, 2018, Larry Isenberg and his wife Lori Isenberg set out on their boat to enjoy the serene waters of Lake Coeur d'Alene in Idaho. The couple had planned to watch the sunrise in the beautiful Sun-Up Bay before heading to an exclusive resort for breakfast. Larry and Lori were the ideal couple and were seen by many as pillars of their community. A few hours into their date, Lori called 911 in a panic. Her husband, Larry, had gone missing.
My husband he had a stroke and he fell over.
Are you out in a boat?
Yeah.
Is he awake?
No.
Okay.
Water.
What happened to Larry? Did he just disappear? Or was there something more disturbing about his disappearance? Today's story takes us to Coeur d'Alene, located in northern Idaho, USA. Coeur d'Alene is celebrated for its natural beauty, vibrant community life, and a wide array of recreational opportunities. The city's crowning jewel is undoubtedly Lake Coeur d'Alene, a shimmering crystal-clear body of water that stretches for miles, offering a paradise for water enthusiasts. With its charming downtown area and welcoming atmosphere, Coeur d'Alene is a magnet for tourists seeking a retreat from the hustle and bustle of city life. Coeur d'Alene is known for its warm and hospitable residents, embodying the friendly spirit of the American Northwest. The city's community is a diverse mix of individuals from various backgrounds and walks of life. In terms of safety, like any community, Coeur d'Alene experiences its share of crime, including property crimes, theft, and occasional incidents of violence. The crime rate in Coeur d'Alene in 2018 was 245.9. However, when compared to larger urban areas, Coeur d'Alene often maintains a lower overall crime rate, making it a relatively safe destination for tourists and a comfortable place to call home for its residents. This is the city where Larry Isenberg, his wife, and children lived. Larry Isenberg was born to Robert Isenberg and Elizabeth Keithley on March 1, 1950, in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. He grew up in an area known for generations of families dedicated to logging and millwork, so naturally, his life was built on hard work and family values. After earning a degree in forestry from the University of Idaho, he dove headfirst into the lumber industry. In 1974, Larry married his first wife and welcomed 2 children, Jessica and Dean, into the world. Their marriage eventually came to an end after their kids grew up. After the divorce, Larry focused on his work and often took out time to go fishing. In 2004, Larry met Lorcine Laurie Barnes at the Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce. Laurie was born in 1953 and had a challenging upbringing. Raised in a sect of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as Mormons, her early life was marked by poverty, sometimes having to find shelter in vacant farmhouses. In 1973, at just 19, she married Stephen Barnes, and together they had 6 daughters. However, their marriage ended in 1996. Laurie moved to Coeur d'Alene as a single mother, determined to find a better life for her children. Laurie was charming, cheerful, and compassionate. She had a warm smile, and her infectious laughter drew people to her. In 2004, Larry and Laurie found each other, and their love story blossomed. They quickly got married, and residents saw them as the perfect couple. Their love extended to their large extended family, and they relished hosting gatherings at their secluded cabin, a slice of paradise just south of town. By 2009, the Isenbergs had become pillars of the Coeur d'Alene community. Larry, though retired, remained active in various civic groups, while Laurie became the executive director of the North Idaho Housing Coalition, an organization dedicated to improving access to affordable housing for low to moderate income families. As the executive director with the authority to manage annual grant funding of up to $3 million, Laurie held a significant position. She loved her job because it mirrored her values of helping those in need.
Are you tired of renting? Want to buy a home? Well, you're not alone. Almost everyone starts out renting with that dream that someday they can own their own home. Hi, I'm Lori Isenberg, Executive Director of the North Idaho Housing Coalition, and I'm very pleased to be able to take a few minutes and talk to you about 2 programs we have that may be able to help you or someone you know purchase a home.
While Laurie was smart, persuasive, and resourceful, Larry was a passionate outdoorsman, finding solace and joy in the natural world. Whether it was spending time on the serene Lake Coeur d'Alene, embarking on hunting adventures, or taking long walks in the great outdoors, he cherished these moments.
Got a lot of neat geology behind it. Later we'll find one about monkey balls.
However, above all else, Larry treasured his family, with Laurie at the center of his world. The couple both loved fishing. Early on the morning of February 13, 2018, Larry and Laurie set out on their boat to enjoy the serene waters of Lake Coeur d'Alene, planning to watch the sunrise in the beautiful Sun-Up Bay before heading to an exclusive resort for breakfast. The couple's boat ride began beautifully, but things took a sharp turn. At 10:25 a.m., Laurie called 911 in a panic, saying Laurie had had a stroke and fell into the lake.
911, what's the address to your emergency?
I'm on the lake.
I'm sorry, I can't understand you. What's the address?
I'm on the lake, but I don't know where. My husband had a stroke and he fell over.
Are you out in a boat?
Yeah.
Is he awake?
No, he's
Okay.
in the water.
He's in the water?
He's gone. I've been looking for him for hours.
She was so hysterical that she was incoherent and the dispatcher had trouble understanding her. Laurie explained that Larry thought the boat had motor problems. He stood up to check and tragically fell overboard while speaking to her. The dispatcher warned Laurie to put on a life jacket, but in the chaos, she slipped inside the boat and hit her head. After 2 hours, Laurie called 911 again from Larry's phone. She explained that as Larry leaned over, he fell in. She tried to grab him, but tripped and hit her head.
He was driving the boat, and he stood up fast, and he said that something's wrong with the motor. And so then he unzipped the cover thing and went to the front of the boat. He turned towards me to say something about the electric motor, and his face, and he fell over.
She claimed that she hadn't called earlier because she was desperately searching for him and had left her phone at home. Laurie told the dispatcher that Larry hadn't been feeling well lately and might have had a mini-stroke. She stated that he looked pale and ill before the trip. She also confirmed that he texted his friends that he'd had the flu. When Kootenai County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the scene, Laurie was alone on the boat. She had a bloody nose, which she explained happened when she was attempting to save Larry. The police immediately swung into action and a big search began.
He said he didn't feel good and he was doing things weird, and then he went up to the motor and the motor was broken. It was the other motor.
Okay.
And then I said, "Why are you doing that?" And he turned to look at me and his face just looked...
Okay.
It looked awful, and then it just started to fall, and I tried to get the door open and get to him, and I couldn't grab him, and I fell.
I'm just going to try to ask you some questions so we can kind of figure out where to go from here. Okay? Can you tell me, how did you get the bloody nose?
I fell down.
You fell down.
So
Okay. she
fell against the door. I was trying to grab him.
Okay. All right. Well, we got
Find him.
we got the best people out there looking for him right now, okay?
Authorities scoured the Powderhorn Bay and East Point area in the southeast of the lake, desperately searching for Larry Isenberg. They tried to use sonar equipment, but the rough weather and cold disrupted the tools. Lori Isenberg joined the search team, hoping to help in narrowing down the search area. Rescue teams combed the lake, but there were fears that Larry may have already succumbed to the chilling water temperature, which was about 38 degrees that day. Interestingly, earlier that same morning, Lori made front-page headlines in the local newspaper with the headline, "Housing Nonprofit Leader Part Ways." Shockingly, the North Idaho Housing Coalition had discovered and exposed her embezzlement activities, severing ties with her as their executive director. The North Idaho Housing Coalition had ordered an internal audit due to alarming account irregularities. It was revealed that Lori had considerable access to their bank accounts, operated with limited oversight, and had gone as far as submitting fraudulent invoices from companies established in her daughters' names with their knowledge. The extent of the embezzlement was staggering. More than 33 credit cards were involved, some issued to Lori's daughters and even Larry. Money had been siphoned off from bank accounts, amounting to a staggering $500,000. On February 23, 2018, 10 days after Larry's disappearance, the police secured a search warrant for Lori's residence. In an unsettling twist, Larry's wallet was discovered in the house, neatly tucked away in a desk. This raised eyebrows, as Lori had claimed they were heading out for a breakfast date on the day Larry disappeared. Even more concerning were the bloody latex glove and bloody tissue the police found inside the house, intensifying the mystery and raising suspicions about Lori's role in Larry's disappearance. The police also noticed that shortly after Larry's disappearance on February 13, 2018, Lori had sent an email to the North Idaho Housing Coalition. In the email, she acknowledged the accident involving Larry and asked for forgiveness for the embezzlement of funds. Lori pledged to reimburse the stolen funds and mentioned her intent to sell her home to settle the debt. On February 27, 2018, Lori Isenberg was arrested. She was charged with 40 counts of forgery and 1 count of grand theft. Her bail was set at $75,000. On February 28, 2018, one of her daughters swiftly posted her bail. The very next day, on March 1, 2018, after 2 weeks of searching, a resident reported a body floating face down in the Sunup Bay.
911, what is the address of the emergency? Port Lane. Okay, and tell me exactly what happened.
Well, nothing's happened, but I believe that there's a dead body on our shoreline, right outside of our house.
The police swiftly responded and recovered the body. To confirm the identity, an autopsy was ordered by the Spokane Medical Examiner's Office alongside the Kootenay County Coroner's Office. Meanwhile, after Lori's bail was posted, Lori went to Seattle in April 2018, where she met her sister and daughter, Chrislyn Woolston. During this meeting, Lori revealed to them that she was scared that the police would wrongfully implicate her for murder. During the conversation, Lori told her daughter that she felt she could no longer maintain contact with her children, and after that, no one saw her again. A month later, Lori made a disturbing call to her daughter from an unknown number. She apologized and explained that she had to disappear. Chrislyn, despite the circumstances, believed in her mother's innocence, assuring her that she'd fight for the truth. After that, Lori failed to appear in court, resulting in the forfeiture of the $75,000 bond co-signed by her daughter. In May 2018, following Lori's failure to appear for 2 court dates related to her fraud case, a substantial $500,000 bench warrant was issued for her arrest. While Lori was in hiding, the Kootenay County Coroner's Office released the findings from Larry Isenberg's autopsy. The autopsy revealed that the body was that of Larry Isenberg. Shockingly, according to the autopsy, Larry had an extremely high level of diphenhydramine. Diphenhydramine is known for causing drowsiness even at normal dosage levels, which typically range between 100 and 1,000 nanograms per milliliter. However, the autopsy revealed that a staggering 7,100 nanograms of diphenhydramine were detected in Larry's body at the time of his death. The autopsy also revealed that there were no signs of stroke and no signs of drowning. These shocking revelations turned the case into a full-fledged homicide investigation. In the subsequent months, investigators tried to find out the truth behind Larry's death. Meanwhile, after several months on the run, Lori turned herself in July 2018. Authorities suspected Lori was hiding near sister Jamie DeVault's home in Southern California, who had previously claimed she didn't know Lori's whereabouts. In November 2018, Lori agreed to plead guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of federal program theft. She agreed to pay $579,495 in restitution. Additionally, 4 of her daughters, Tracy Tesh, Amber Hoskin, Jessica Barnes, and April Barnes, also pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit program theft, acknowledging their involvement in the scheme. Tesh admitted to having received about $15,300 from the fraudulent activities, while Hoskin confessed to receiving $16,500 from the scheme. Jessica Barnes admitted to receiving $15,500, while April Barnes confessed to having received approximately $11,500. The daughters acknowledged receiving money for work they hadn't actually performed. Jessica Barnes was reported to have lived in one of the homes owned by the Housing Coalition. When she couldn't afford the rent, her mother, Lori, fraudulently covered it using federal funds or donations. Her daughters were sentenced to 3 years of probation and were ordered to complete 100 hours of community service. Lori Isenberg was sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud. Interestingly, it seems Larry was unaware of all the elaborate schemes by Lori and her daughters to defraud the North Idaho Housing Coalition. While in jail, Lori underwent a profound religious transformation. She started sending her daughter, Chrislyn Woolston, letters filled with scripture and requested weekly Sunday school lessons. However, when she brought up the topic of faith in a jailhouse call in March 2019, Woolston gently declined to discuss that topic, triggering a sudden change in Lori's demeanor. Lori was frustrated that her daughter hadn't forgiven her and ended the call abruptly. However, as one case ended, another had only just begun. The investigation into Larry's homicide was deliberately kept under wraps for 2 years. During this time, Lori was already in jail, serving time for the earlier fraud charges. This strategic move allowed law enforcement to carefully build their case without Lori being free in the community. Lori reportedly had connections with the local police and was even friends with some of them. These ties seemingly played a role in the initial stages of the investigation, where, despite discrepancies in her statements, she was not immediately viewed as a suspect in Larry's disappearance. This time, she enjoyed no such privileges. The detectives went back to the drawing board, from Lori's call to 911 to when the body was found. The detectives' suspicions were piqued by the strange location where Larry's body was discovered. If he fell overboard at the area Lori indicated, his body would not have been found in Sunup Bay because of the water current. To further investigate and confirm their suspicions, they conducted an experiment using dummies. They placed the dummies in the area Lori said the accident happened. Astonishingly, the dummies in the experiment floated in a direction contrary to where Larry's body was recovered. This discrepancy showed that Lori was not telling the truth. The detectives suspected that Lori knew the Carla Jan article exposing her fraud was about to be published, and this would expose her actions to Larry. So she'd poisoned Larry earlier and then dumped his body in the river. This theory appeared to have been confirmed when the medical examiner checked Larry's stomach and found bits of tomato and green peppers, showing he hadn't fully digested his last meal. However, this theory was dismissed with the aid of a photo sent to Larry's children as well as some of Lori's children. It was an Apple Live photo with a small part of a video. In the background, a man's voice was heard, believed to be Larry's. A friend of Larry's confirmed it was him, providing evidence that he was alive when he got on the boat. The detectives then went on to search the couple's vehicle and discovered a Benadryl bottle in the center console. They also found an empty naked juice bottle in Laurie's purse. They suspected that the pills were put into the juice and Larry had consumed it. Sergeant Brad Maskill from the Kootenay County Sheriff's Office conducted an experiment. He wanted to see how quickly Benadryl dissolved in naked juice and if it could be detected in the drink. Surprisingly, it only took a few minutes for the pill to dissolve in the juice. Sergeant Maskill didn't actually swallow the juice with the pills, but he still felt a bit dizzy, even without swallowing it. This led to the detectives to suggest that Larry might have quickly drank the juice and perhaps didn't notice the bitter medicine aftertaste. As the investigation intensified, the detectives checked Laurie's phone and discovered concerning searches. She'd looked up information about several coastal areas in Florida. Additionally, her searches included topics related to water deaths, boat rentals, and water depths. While still serving her federal prison sentence for fraud and embezzlement charges, Laurie was charged with premeditated murder, accused of poisoning, torturing, and possibly lying in wait to commit the crime against her husband, Larry Isenberg. On February 24, 2020, police arrested Laurie, who was 66 at the time, on the premeditated murder charge and took her to court. In February 2020, 2 years after Larry Isenberg's body was found in Lake Coeur d'Alene, a grand jury indicted Laurie Isenberg on charges of first-degree murder through the use of poison, a crime punishable by death. However, due to the pandemic, her trial was repeatedly postponed. A year later, in February 2021, Laurie Isenberg opted for an Alford plea, a legal maneuver where she maintained her innocence but acknowledged that there was substantial evidence that could lead to her conviction if the case went to trial. In doing so, she entered a plea of second-degree murder, not explicitly admitting guilt, but recognizing the potential outcome of a trial based on the evidence against her. This decision annoyed Larry's loved ones, who felt that it allowed Laurie to avoid admitting guilt, which they found deeply hurtful. During her trial, more information about her vicious plan was revealed in court. Prosecutors showed that a clear indication of diphenhydramine toxicity is the presence of brain fog. Remarkably, this was a symptom Larry Isenberg had reported to his doctor while vacationing in Florida just about a month before his tragic demise. According to prosecutors, it's believed that Laurie Isenberg made an attempt on her husband's life during a family trip. In the days leading up to the boat ride where Larry allegedly went overboard, the couple had gone to Florida to witness a rocket launch. However, Larry's health began deteriorating during this trip. He reached out to his doctor via email, expressing that he was grappling with what seemed like the flu. Larry described his symptoms, mentioning the shakes, a severe lack of balance, and a persisting mental fog. These signs were later linked to the toxic levels of diphenhydramine found in his system. The court also heard that in January 2018, Laurie made handwritten alterations to Larry's will. These modifications significantly favored Laurie's 6 daughters, allocating a substantial 80% of Larry's estate to them and leaving a mere 20% for his own 2 children. In the week leading up to Larry's tragic death, Laurie had canceled the couple's subscription to the Coeur d'Alene Press, the newspaper that had learned of her theft and was preparing to publish an article about it. Days before the ill-fated boat trip, Laurie had liquidated all their joint accounts and transferred other shared properties to herself, her daughters, and her sister. Laurie was worried that if Larry discovered her theft, he might have divorced her and potentially retained a significant portion, if not all, of their jointly owned assets valued at about $1.5 million. Prosecutors pointed out that her motive was to eliminate Larry from the picture. She took her husband's life to avoid the humiliation of losing half of her assets in a divorce. During the trial, Dean Isenberg, Larry's son, shared the deep bond he had with his father, Larry Isenberg. He told the court that Larry was not only a father, but also his best friend. Dean revealed that Larry would have undoubtedly divorced Laurie had he known about Laurie's criminal activities. Despite the circumstances, Dean emphasized the lasting impact Larry had on everyone he encountered. He described him as unforgettable. Even those who may have had negative feelings had love for him in their hearts. Lori Isenberg dabbed at her eyes with a tissue during this emotional testimony from her stepson. Dean painted a portrait of Larry as an honorable and hardworking man who deeply loved his family, especially his wife, Lori. Turning to Lori, Dean said that he hoped her actions were motivated by a desire to spare Larry the heartbreak of discovering her deceitful actions. However, when Lori addressed the court, she refused to admit to intentionally killing Larry. She claimed she'd prepared to drink the Benadryl for herself with the intention to end her own life. She stated that since her embezzlement was discovered, she had felt her life was over. She insisted she'd never intended to escape consequences for her actions. According to her account, she'd planned on taking the poison and drowning in Lake Coeur d'Alene, but Larry mistakenly consumed the poisoned drink while she was asleep on the boat. Larry claimed that the shock of the events from that fateful morning left her unable to recall further details. She claimed that her overwhelming emotions had clouded her memory. She claimed she contemplated following her husband into the water to end her life as well. However, she maintained that she had planned to do so only after resolving matters with her family.
I'm so sorry for everything I did. Starting with the embezzlement that resulted in the lies, deceit, and ultimate betrayal of the love and the trust of the people I love, especially Larry. I want to state emphatically that I am responsible for Larry's death. Absolutely.
However, Lori acknowledged her responsibility for Larry's death, emphasizing that he'd still be alive if not for her actions. Larry's children were frustrated and angered by Lori's reluctance to reveal the complete truth regarding the events. They believed she was withholding crucial information. This view was shared by two of Lori's own daughters, Amber Hoskins and Jessica Barnes, who openly labeled her as a liar.
The manner in which I lost my father, Larry Isenberg, has left a hole in my soul that I will never be able to fill. He was an incredible person. He was extremely hardworking and had an insatiable thirst for knowledge. He actively sought opportunities to learn something new every day, and he loved sharing that knowledge by teaching others and encouraging them to learn and grow too.
During the sentencing, Judge Scott Wayman expressed his belief that Lori's version of events was the truth as she perceived it. However, he emphasized that her truth did not align with the evidence. The judge pointed out that Larry loved his wife until the very end, placing his trust in her, only for that trust to be shattered by her actions. Eventually, Judge Wayman sentenced Lori to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years and credit for time served. Larry Isenberg's family quietly accepted the verdict. Dean shared a special bond with his late father, Larry. And now, through Echo, Larry's 4-year-old retriever, he feels a deep connection to his father whenever he's outdoors with the dog. Echo's longing for Larry is evident as she eagerly reacts to reminders of her previous home. Larry Isenberg's story reminds us that although trust is a vital element of any relationship, it can also be a double-edged sword. Do you think that justice was served for Larry Isenberg? Do you believe that Lori is remorseful at all about her actions?
Vanessa Marcotte had been living her dream, living in New York and working at Google. She was visiting family in Princeton when she went out for a walk and never came back.
It has been more than 4 months since Vanessa was tragically taken from us. Not a day goes by that we don't reflect on the enormity of our loss. Vanessa possessed special gifts. She was a loving, caring, and intelligent young woman who had her whole life ahead of her.
On August 7th, 2016, 27-year-old Vanessa Marcotte was visiting her mother, Rosanna Marcotte, in her hometown of Princeton, Massachusetts, when tragedy struck the family. Vanessa was merely going for a walk in the afternoon, but little did she know that it was the last time she would ever be seen. Oblivious of the future, she left her mother's home in the early afternoon. When a few hours passed and she still hadn't returned, her mother immediately called the police. But what unfolded next was something that no mother should ever have to go through. What could have happened to the young woman just going out for a walk? Was her tragedy part of something bigger? The town of Princeton, Massachusetts is rich in its history. Apart from its many scenic views, the place has witnessed some of the important events in history. Quite a few famous names are associated with the place, including Edward Savage, the painter who made Washington's portrait. Its history tends to draw tourists in, who come here looking for an adventure and are waiting to be amazed. With a population of just under 3,500 people, Princeton is a relatively small town where almost everyone knows everyone. But in 2016, when a shocking crime occurred here, it had the residents looking over their shoulders and questioning whether it could be someone they knew who was responsible. Vanessa Teressa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in Leominster, Massachusetts, to her parents Rosanna Marcotte and John Marcotte. An only child, she attended the Bancroft School in Worcester, Massachusetts. She had an aspiring career in communications. She earned her degree and graduated with honors from Boston University in 2011, and immediately after, she was able to work in the field of online marketing. Inevitably, she was able to make her way towards becoming an account manager at Google in New York City. This 27-year-old woman was following her dreams and ambitions, looking for a future that would suit her best. Her presence was capable of leaving an impact on the people around her. An e-commerce specialist named David Garish called her dedication towards her work and career as achievement-oriented and labeled her as an efficient customer service specialist. No doubt, Vanessa had a bright future ahead of her, if only she was allowed the chance to keep moving forward. On a seemingly mundane afternoon of August 7, 2016, Vanessa was visiting her mother who lived at Brook Station Road, Princeton, in the state of Massachusetts. She went out for a walk at around 1 p.m. During this time, she was seen chatting on the phone when she stopped for a drink near Hubbardston Road. However, her mother was unaware of her whereabouts at the time. Several hours later, when there was still no sign of Vanessa, and her mother was unable to reach her phone, she started to panic and decided to file a missing persons report for her daughter. It was unlike Vanessa to not respond to her mother if there was ever a change of plans. The police, realizing the gravity of the situation, immediately organized a search party specifically dispatched to look for her. The search began soon after, but there was still no sign of her. The police checked all the routes she usually took, but it was as if Vanessa had simply vanished. Vanessa's last known location placed her near the crime scene at 2:11 p.m., after which no more signals were picked up from her phone, indicating that the phone was either shut off or disabled. It was around 8 p.m. into the night when the police officers came across a naked corpse in a heavily wooded area almost half a mile away from Vanessa's mother's house. The officials were instantly able to identify her as Vanessa Marcotte. Her corpse was badly bruised and burn marks spread all over her body. There were strangulation marks on her neck as well. After the authorities had recorded all the evidence found at the crime scene, the investigation into her death began. Given the state of the body, the officers were able to confirm that she'd been assaulted, and the severity of the wounds indicated that she'd fought back with whatever she had. Apart from her clothes, her cell phone and earphones were missing as well. Forensic specialists were also able to recover foreign DNA on the corpse as well, an important discovery that could prove to be crucial later on in the investigation. The case in itself gained a lot of media attention. The case of Vanessa Marcotte was all over the news, with people asking questions like, why was she targeted?
A man wanted for the murder of a Google employee from New York is in custody. Vanessa Marcotte was killed while jogging near her mother's home in Massachusetts.
In the next couple of days, almost all the news channels were doing extensive coverage of the investigation.
We have the second jogging murder in a week, this time in Massachusetts, where a young woman runner was killed in broad daylight, drawing comparisons to last week's killing in Queens, New York.
Vanessa Marcotte had been living her dream, living in New York and working at Google. She was visiting family in Princeton when she went out for a walk and never came back.
The scrutiny of the public eye motivated the authorities to move things along at a quicker pace and hopefully capture the culprit while the trail was still hot. During the initial stages of the investigation, there were quite a few speculations. There were some theories going around that suggested that Vanessa's murder might be related to the homicide of Karina Vetrano in Queens, New York. This homicide in New York occurred on August 2, 2016, and much like Vanessa, Vetrano's body also indicated signs of assault and was severely abused. Vetrano's murder had occurred just a few days prior to Vanessa's, and she too was abducted while running and assaulted in the same manner. The similarities between the cases compelled the investigators to find a connection between the two, but it was soon established that, other than the manner of abduction and existence of bodily wounds, both the cases couldn't be further apart from each other. No official statement was ever released regarding the similarities of the two cases, but speculations were thrown around for a while. Frustrated, with no other course of action at hand, the authorities finally decided to set up a tip line. They hoped that perhaps civilians might have witnessed something that would eventually lead them in the right direction.
It has been a very long week for investigators in this small town as they try to uncover clues that lead to a killer. They are still focused on a time frame between 1 and 3 Sunday afternoon. That's when Vanessa Marcotte was out for a run along Brooks Station Road. Police say no detail is too small. They want information about any car on that road, and they're asking people to come forward if they saw a man this week who was scratched or bruised.
This decision proved to be extremely helpful. With the help of the tip line, through which they received over 1,300 tips, they were finally able to establish that the attacker was most likely a male with scratches, cuts, and bruises over his arms and possibly the face, given the fight Vanessa had put up at the time of her death, as showcased by her autopsy reports. As more information came to light, the police realized that the attack may have been completely random, as opposed to their initial theory of it being connected to other cases. By November 2016, the suspect's vehicle was identified, and by December in the same year, Vanessa's family finally broke their silence. Apart from their gratitude to the community for assisting in the investigation, they announced the establishment of the Vanessa T. Marcotte Foundation.
It has been more than 4 months since Vanessa was tragically taken from us. Not a day goes by that we don't reflect on the enormity of our loss. Vanessa possessed special gifts. She was a loving, caring, and intelligent young woman who had her whole life ahead of her. In her brief 27 years, she had already achieved much, but we know she had much more to do. Vanessa embraced the spirit of giving back and volunteerism. To that end, the family has set up a website, vanessamarcotte.org, so that you may learn more about Vanessa and the causes that were close to her heart. You can also learn about the establishment of the Vanessa T. Marcotte Foundation, which will support projects sharing Vanessa's values.
It wasn't until February of 2017 that the DNA which was found at the crime scene produced some concrete results. The DNA sample helped them further narrow down the characteristics of the culprit. It was revealed to the public that the suspect was likely to be a Hispanic male of athletic build with short or shaven hair. Further witness accounts also indicated that the suspect either possessed or had access to a black SUV on the day of the murder. 6 months after the incident, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph D. Early Jr. ensured the public that the foreign DNA found at the crime scene had been worked on in the labs and that they finally had a suspect by the name of Angelo Colonottis.
We got him.
Early this morning, State Police arrested 31-year-old Angelo Colonottis in connection with the murder of Vanessa Marcotte last August in Boston, Massachusetts. On the afternoon of August 7th, 2016, Vanessa left the family home on Brook Station Road, where she had been visiting family, to go for a walk, and she never returned.
Angelo Colonottis was a native Puerto Rican and had a family with 3 kids. According to official records, he had no past criminal history and was a local resident of Worcester for almost a year, which indicated that he knew the surrounding areas quite well. He was employed at FedEx as a third-party contractor. His delivery routes also encompassed areas in and around Princeton. Further interviews with close relatives and friends revealed that Angelo had quite a questionable character. His neighbors claimed that he often made vulgar or perverted remarks to those around him. a few of his former female co-workers also came forward claiming that he was known for making crude remarks about them in Spanish. As more people came forward regarding his offensive behavior, the more it became evident that the tragedy that struck Marcotte may have been an extreme result of an ongoing pattern. To build the case against Angelo, police used a number of key pieces of evidence. Apart from the DNA evidence, quite a few local witnesses placed him around the murder site at the time of death. He was reported to have bought $5 worth of gas at a nearby gas station. One of his neighbors mentioned that he'd seen Angelo somewhere around noon, standing behind the hood of his black SUV. But after a while, as 2 p.m. rolled around, he was no longer there. The data from the cell phone records also placed him there at the reported time. The timestamp from Vanessa's phone was affirmed to be near the time of attack, and Angelo had no alibi to place him anywhere else during the hour. On April 14, 2017, a 36-year-old Angelo Colon Ortiz was arrested on the charge of murder in the first degree and aggravated assault. A police officer on patrol had noticed Angelo's car, which matched the description of the culprit's vehicle. The officer decided to follow his gut feeling and immediately followed up by tracking down the license plate, which inevitably led to the arrest. The arraignment was held on April 18th, where the bail was set at $10 million. The DNA was the main piece of concrete evidence leading to the apprehension of the culprit under the name of the law, which is why, during trial, Angelo's lawyer, Eduardo Mansfer, attempted to have the DNA evidence thrown out, claiming that the sample was obtained under false pretenses due to a language barrier. However, this claim was instantly refuted by the district attorney, since official records proved that the sample was given up voluntarily. On January 11, 2022, the judge chose to deny the motion to suppress. The DNA evidence was inevitably permitted to be presented as an integral part of the case, and it was on the basis of this evidence that the court was able to convict and sentence Angelo. On October 26, 2022, now 36-year-old Angelo Colon Ortiz pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and unarmed robbery. The added charge of unarmed robbery is said to have pressured Angelo into finally pleading guilty in exchange for a plea deal. The judge, Janet Kenton Walker, sentenced the man to 25 years to life in prison for the second-degree murder and 20 years to a day in prison for the second charge of unarmed robbery. Apart from the sentence, he'll also not be eligible for parole for the next 45 years of his life. After going through such a harrowing ordeal, it was Vanessa Marcotte's family that insisted on taking the plea deal. District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. reported to the press that since the family didn't want to relive their trauma by listening to the graphic details of their daughter's death, they'd asked him to go ahead and accept the deal.
Under an agreement with prosecutors, the murder charge was reduced from first-degree murder to second-degree, with the approval of Vanessa's family, who filled the courtroom and offered tearful victim impact statements. Rosanna Marcotte, Vanessa's mother, told the judge, "She was my only child. She was my world." Vanessa is seen here with her father, John, who never got to see justice. He died 10 days ago.
The dispirited condition of the family may also have related to the fact that Vanessa Marcotte's father, John Marcotte, had died just 10 days before Angelo's sentencing.
All Vanessa's dad had left to live for was justice. Honestly, every day for the last 6 years, that was the only thing that he was fighting for. But ultimately, I think just having to endure this for so long is really what led him to his death.
The members of the family were trying to cope with yet another loss and couldn't bear to prolong the trial any further. Justice may have taken its time in this case, but it did its due diligence. Despite the overwhelming evidence present in the case, it still took over 6 years for the murderer to be finally sentenced. However, the family isn't entirely dissatisfied with the result. They believe the murderer got the sentence he deserved. They're more focused on the Vanessa T. Marcotte Foundation they started in the honor of her memory. The foundation is currently thriving and is responsible for teaching countless women how to defend themselves against culprits like Angelo Colon Ortiz. They did not want anyone else to go through the ordeal they had to suffer, so they're passionate about keeping the foundation up and running as a way of continuing Vanessa's legacy.
Go. Setting boundaries. Go. Learning techniques. A room full of women inspired in the memory of one.
She was a beautiful, smart,
compassionate young woman.
It has been a year and a half since Vanessa Marcotte lost her life, attacked while on a run in her hometown of Princeton. Her family and friends now turning tragedy into prevention.
The end of this very emotionally turbulent case leaves us in a very conflicted sort of wonder. The family may have claimed peace with the decision, but do you think the family of the victim got the justice they deserved? Was the judge's decision too lenient, or did it fall in perfect alignment to the crime? How long is too long for a murder case to be solved? And to what extent will investigators go to solve it? The particular case that we're sharing with you today underwent the test of time. 2 generations of law enforcement officials and the long-awaited advancement of forensic science before justice was finally served. This case takes us back in time to the 1970s in Texas. During the 1970s, Fort Worth, Texas underwent a dynamic transformation. The city embraced new waves of technology and industry, encapsulating the spirit of change and growth that characterized the era across North Texas. During the 70s, Fort Worth, like numerous cities across the United States, navigated a complex landscape of crime trends. The city witnessed periods of both increase and decrease in various types of crimes, including property crimes like burglaries and thefts, as well as violent crimes such as assaults and robberies. Urbanization often brought about increased opportunities for criminal activities due to population density and shifting social dynamics. One such incident was the murder of Carla Jan Walker. On February 20th, 1974, 4 days after Carla Jan Walker's disappearance, police discovered her partially clothed remains in a culvert near Benbrook Lake in Fort Worth, North Texas. Let's go back to 1974, when 17-year-old Carla Jan Walker was attending Western Hills High School as a junior. With a height of 4'11", Carla was an active member of the school tennis team and a cheerleader. 18-year-old Rodney McCoy, her boyfriend, was a senior at the same school. He was the captain and quarterback of the varsity football team. By the time 1974 rolled around, the couple had been in a relationship for approximately a year. With graduation around the corner, Rodney intended to enroll at Texas Tech University located in Lubbock, and Carla had made plans to join him there. As a symbol of their commitment, Rodney had presented Carla with a promise ring. On the evening of February 16, 1974, Carla was wearing that very ring as she and Rodney attended a Valentine's Day dance at the school. Carla wore a powder blue dress with delicate white ruffles. Prior to the dance, Carla and Rodney took a ride in a big Ford LTD car which belonged to Rodney's mother. They visited a couple of familiar spots associated with Western Hills High School before finally parking in the lot situated behind Brunswick Ridgely Bowl at the Benbrook traffic circle. As the couple was sharing a romantic moment inside the car, the door of the passenger seat flung open, and outside was a stranger with a pistol in his hands.
And when he opened the door, we both our heads both fell out of the car, basically.
Rodney told authorities that the stranger started hitting Rodney with the butt of the pistol.
He nailed me pretty good on the first shot with the butt of the pistol. He had put his hand inside the car and stuck the pistol about 3 or 4 inches from my face and started pulling the trigger. I do remember clicks, 3 clicks.
Rodney recounts that, strangely, the pistol didn't fire. But by that time, the stranger had already grabbed Carla by her arms and kept hitting Rodney with the other hand.
Finally, she said, stop hitting him, I'll go with you.
Did you recognize this guy?
No, I didn't even get a look at the guy's face.
Did it seem that Carla knew him?
No.
What do you say?
I didn't say anything. It was all I could do to hold myself up and trying to wipe the blood at the same time.
Rodney eventually blacked out and had no recollection of how long it took him to come to. Upon regaining consciousness, Rodney realized that Carla was missing and all of her belongings were scattered across the parking lot. Rodney hurried to inform the Walkers about the incident. He made a scraping sound as he reached the porch of the Walkers. Jim, Carla's youngest brother, heard the noise around 1:40 a.m., where luckily Carla's parents were also up late playing dominoes. Carla's father and the police searched for Carla in the nearby areas of the crime scene. However, despite their immediate actions, the young girl wasn't found that night. The next morning, a group of people came together to search for Carla. The police, her friends, neighbors, and even a helicopter joined in the effort. They searched everywhere on foot, horseback, and in cars. Students from her school, Western Hills High School, also gathered to pray for her safe return. However, on February 20th, 4 days after her disappearance, police discovered the partially clothed remains of Carla Walker in a culvert near Benbrook Lake. Once Carla was discovered lifeless, police discovered that she was beaten, assaulted, and strangled. The Fort Worth lab authorities found bodily fluids in her undergarments. However, the limited forensic capabilities in 1974 hindered an in-depth analysis which could lead them in the direction of a perpetrator. Adding to the mystery was the fact that shortly after Carla's funeral, the Walker family started receiving mysterious calls where the person on the other end of the line said nothing. There was a time when the calls came every week and continued for almost a year. The police tried tracking the calls, but their efforts were in vain. The journey of this case was truly unique, marked by numerous twists and turns that kept both investigators and the public on their toes. In the initial 4 years of the investigation, potential suspects emerged, only to be followed by unexpected developments that left investigators feeling perplexed and disheartened. Let's delve into the intriguing course of this investigation and uncover the hidden truths. In 1975, a significant development emerged with the first identified suspect in the case, 23-year-old Tommy Ray Nealand, a carpet layer from Euless. He was thought to have a direct connection with Carla's murder. Tommy was arrested on April 23, 1974, and was already serving a sentence of 550 years in prison for one murder and 2 life sentences for other murders. Additionally, he faced a trial in Fort Worth for the aggravated kidnapping of a 16-year-old girl from Arlington. The timeline of Tommy's killing spree matched with Carla's abduction. Although Fort Worth investigators were still skeptical about whether Tommy would confess to Carla Walker's murder after Rodney McCoy identified him as his assailant and Carla's abductor, much to their astonishment, Tommy Ray Nealand willingly admitted to the crime. Although already facing trial for the murder of 2 individuals, investigators were almost sure at this point that the case finally got its closure. However, much to their disappointment, Tommy failed his polygraph test, and due to lack of evidence against him, he was ruled out as a suspect. Aside from Tommy Ray Nealand, police were following up on a few other leads as well. They were still searching for the owner of the Ruger .22 caliber pistol magazine, which was found in the parking lot that night. The police initiated inquiries with individuals possessing such weapons, including Glenn Samuel McCurley, residing within close proximity of the bowling alley, just under 2 miles away. McCurley disclosed that his pistol had been stolen approximately 6 weeks prior, aligning with the timeline of Carla's murder. He explained that he refrained from reporting the theft due to his status as a convict. Back in 1961, Glenn McCurley, who was merely 18 at the time, resided in the Westview Boys' Home located in Oklahoma. During that period, he stole a car from a bowling alley. He was subsequently handed a 2-year sentence in Huntsville Prison on charges of grand theft auto. In 1975, Fort Worth burglary detective John F. Terrell apprehended William Ted Wilhoit at his home for a series of burglaries. During the arrest, William said to Detective Terrell, "I wondered when you were coming after me for Carla Walker." After taking William to jail, Detective Terrell engaged in a conversation about Carla's death, aiming to get a confession. Detective Terrell pressed William about Carla, appealing to his conscience and urging him to admit to the crime. William began crying, saying, "Well, I guess I might as well," indicating a possible confession was imminent. However, the interview was interrupted before further progress could be made. A leaflet on Ruger firearms was later found at William's house, connecting him indirectly to the crime, but the evidence was insufficient for charges. He was later sentenced to Huntsville for burglary. In 1976, a photo lineup identified him as being present at the bowling alley on the night of Carla Walker's abduction in 1974. Despite failing a polygraph test, William denied the crime, later suggesting that a similar unprosecuted case contributed to his failed test. It was his guilt that surfaced in the polygraph test regarding his involvement in the attempted murder of TCU student Janelle Kirby in 1974. By 1977, Detective Terrell's suspicion of William regarding the Carla Walker case faded as Jimmy Dean Sasser from Paris, Texas, voluntarily confessed to the murder at a police department in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Subsequently, in 1978, Jimmy was formally charged for the crime. Aside from admitting his involvement, Jimmy also provided the police with a statement in which he explained the abduction and murder of Carla Walker. Finally, it was a relief this time that the suspect was admitting his crime. However, there was more deception involved in this case than anyone would prefer. Investigators observed that Jimmy's account of the abduction contained numerous inaccuracies and crucial details were omitted, causing the Fort Worth police to become increasingly doubtful. Subsequently, Jimmy retracted his confession, explaining that he confessed while in a state of depression following his marital breakup and under the influence of cocaine when he walked into the police station in Murfreesboro. Again, investigators were right back to square one. 1986 marked 12 years since Carla Walker was found murdered, coinciding with Detective John F. Terrell's retirement. Despite the passage of time, the case remained unsolved, yet Detective John still believed it was William Ted Wilhoit who was responsible for the murder. In 1990, responding to Detective Terrell's request, the Fort Worth PD decided to revisit the unsolved Carla Walker case. They aimed to check if William, who was already in prison for another crime, the rape of a woman during his period as a Bible student, could potentially be responsible for Carla's murder. However, this avenue, just like the previous ones, led to another dead end. 12 years later, John F. Terrell, who'd been retired for 16 years by then, took the initiative to establish a website where people could provide tips and information related to the unsolved Carla Walker case in 2002. Sadly, Terrell passed away in 2010. However, in 2017, a Facebook group named Justice for Carla Walker came into existence, continuing the quest for justice in her case. The tables turned in 2019 for the Carla Walker cold case. The police decided to reopen the investigation once more. The case was reopened due to the discovery of a crucial piece of evidence. This evidence had the potential to bring the culprit into the light. It was an anonymous letter received by Detective Oliver Ball shortly after Carla's tragic murder in 1974. Detective Ball had kept this letter to himself throughout the years, never sharing its contents with the public or with Carla Walker's grieving family. To this date, the reason why he kept this a secret remains a mystery. However, this would turn out to become a pivotal clue in the case. In 2019, the police took a significant step in the Carla Walker murder case by publishing a redacted version of the anonymous letter on social media. The letter contained cryptic references relating to Carla's murder. It read, "Kill Carla Walker in Benbrook, sign 10100. And P.S. It's hard to say, but it is true, sign 10100. The news article was aimed to prompt anyone with knowledge of the crime to come forward. However, despite this public appeal, no one stepped forward with any additional information. A year later, in 2020, it marked 46 years since the murder of Carla Walker. The investigation had passed from one generation of investigators to the next. Detectives Leah Wagner and Jeff Bennett, part of the police department's cold case unit, began looking into the case with fresh eyes. They now had access to cutting-edge forensic science that was unavailable in 1974. In April 2020, Detective Paul Holes, known for his work in the Golden State Killer case, featured the Carla Walker case on his TV show The DNA of Murder. Detectives Wagner and Bennett provided him access to their case files and physical evidence. Advanced DNA testing on Carla's underclothing revealed male DNA from previously undetected stains. However, disappointingly, the DNA profile didn't match anyone in the criminal database. Despite initial setbacks, Detective Paul Holes pursued new ways to crack the Carla Walker case. He introduced Fort Worth police to Othram, a forensic genealogy lab near Houston. Using advanced parallel DNA sequencing, Othram reconstructed the DNA sample's genome and uploaded it to GEDmatch, an online service for comparing DNA data files. This crucial juncture marked a turning point where the case finally gained significant momentum. The suspect this time was just a step away from the investigators. Through the DNA comparison, investigators discovered a distant relative match, ultimately leading to the identification of 3 brothers with the surname McCurley. This name struck a chord with Detective Jeff Bennett, as Glenn Samuel McCurley was a suspect from 1974. Fort Worth police swiftly collected items from Glenn's trash, and DNA tests matched the male profile identified from Carla's underclothing, solidifying their suspicions. In 1974, Glenn denied any involvement and claimed his pistol had been stolen. He stuck to his story in 2020 when questioned again, but agreed to provide a mouse swab for DNA testing. The results affirmed a match with the DNA found on Carla's underclothing, leading to Glenn Samuel McCurley's arrest on September 21, 2020 for capital murder. Upon being taken into custody, Glenn was interrogated in hopes of obtaining a confession. Although he tried his level best to maintain his innocence, interrogators were determined. Here are some of the key insights of the 2-hour-long interrogation.
So let me just start by talking. We're not going to ask you anything until let me say some things first, okay? We're here because we are looking into the murder of Carla Walker. And we've done a very thorough investigation. We know what happened, and our evidence has led us to you, okay? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I know you're confused, but you shouldn't be, because we know what happened, okay? Now this is your opportunity to talk to us, to tell us your side, because I have bosses that I have to answer to, and what they want to know is that if you have any regret, if there's anything that you can tell us that doesn't paint a picture of you that makes you look like a monster. Because frankly, right now, when you're talking about a young girl that got murdered, we only have one side, and we'd like to hear yours, okay? So that's why we're here today, okay? We know what happened, but we'd like to hear from you. If there's anything, hold on, okay? All right, before we go any further though, okay, I gotta read something to you just like in the movies.
Here, the detectives, Wagner and Bennett, adopt a direct and assertive approach when confronting Glenn with the charges. Rather than allowing room for Glenn to potentially claim innocence or evade the allegations, she makes a proactive stance to ensure he comprehends the weight of the evidence against him and the police's awareness of his involvement in the crime. This approach can be seen as a strategic move to assert the strength of the case against Glenn, potentially encouraging him to cooperate or provide information that could aid in the investigation. After Glenn was read his Miranda rights, detectives sought his response. However, things got interesting from here from an analysis point of view.
It's up to you. You know, you can either talk to me or not, but we'd really like to talk to you today.
Did I do something to that girl?
Yes, sir.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? What?
That I did. I don't know. I've never seen the girl or anything. When was I supposed to have done this?
Okay, so are you willing to talk to me today about this case?
The other day when you came.
Okay, but are you willing to talk to us today? I mean, it's like I said, it's your right to either speak with us or not. You know, but I got to be clear on whether or not you're willing to talk.
Well, I don't know. I don't know anything about this stuff.
Okay.
Glenn's decision to not clearly waive his Miranda rights during the interrogation signified the start of his defense strategy. This choice initiated a power struggle within the interrogation room, as Glenn appeared to use a tactic of misunderstanding the significance of his rights. By going back and forth with his claims about non-involvement in the crime, he introduced elements of uncertainty and ambiguity, repeatedly claiming that there's nothing to discuss even if he were to agree to talk. This suggested that he was indeed aware of his situation and circumstances that were against him.
That's what the whole thing was over, that I understood.
Ms. McCurley, can you look at that picture and just tell us for sure that you do not know who she is? You've not had any contact with her?
I've never seen her before. I don't know who she is.
Okay.
if she's standing right beside of me. You say it's what's your name?
Carla Walker. So you've never met her before, never seen her?
I've never seen her, never met her, never talked to her, wouldn't know her if she was standing beside of me. But then I'm not, I guess it's not any importance anymore, but there was two guys in a pickup, and I went to check. I had that pistol in under the seat, wrapped up in a cloth, and I didn't think anything about it. And everything looked all right. And then later on, I found out that they had stolen that pistol, and I told the police that came to talk to it at the time that I didn't have the pistol, that it had been stolen. And let's see, they took me downtown and questioned me and all this and that, and I told them exactly what I'm telling you and everything and what happened. And they said that they had found a clip for a .22 pistol. And I didn't know anything about it. They thought that gun might have been used in the robbery or something. So they found it and
In this phase of the interrogation, Detective Wagner tries to gauge Glenn's reactions by presenting him with a photograph of Carla Walker, with the hope of observing any physical cues that might indicate his involvement or knowledge of the crime. Surprisingly, Glenn maintained his innocence and remained in character, showing no visible signs of emotional response. However, his initial denial of any knowledge of Carla Walker's existence began to crumble as he started to discuss his previous questioning as a suspect in 1974. This shift in his narrative is significant, as it suggests a potential awareness of the case and his own connection to it, despite his initial efforts to distance himself from it.
You're saying I killed somebody, and I did not. I did not kill anybody.
Then what did you do?
What do you mean, what did I do? I don't know what I done. I didn't do anything.
You kidnapped her.
I didn't kidnap anybody.
You did. You kidnapped her.
But somebody saw me do this?
Yes, somebody did see you do it.
No.
You made a mistake. You left your boyfriend alive.
I did not kidnap anybody.
Her boyfriend is alive.
And he identified me as the guy.
You're a living witness, okay? You
No.
made a mistake.
I did not do anything like that.
You did. You did.
Ms. McCurley, this really is your time to be able to get this off your chest. And to
If it was on my chest, I didn't do anything like that. Not do anything like that. But I haven't done that.
Maybe you didn't mean to.
No, I didn't mean to. I didn't do it. I did not kill that girl.
Did you kidnap her?
No, I didn't kidnap her. Whoever said they saw me do that is wrong with that. I've been with my wife all the time. Back all those days, we never separated. We never separated and been away from each other. Because she's got a bad heart, and I've got a bad heart.
Your wife was out of town and visiting her dad because he had surgery. He had heart surgery. She was gone during that time period. She was not there.
Her dad? I was with him.
No,
No,
she
you
said
were
she
here.
went without you. She just said last week she went to go see her daddy because he had heart surgery and you were not there. She went. She was out of town.
Where was she out of town at?
In Midland.
With your two boys.
No, that never happened.
That's what
She wouldn't go to, she doesn't, I don't even let her drive.
This was 46 years ago.
I know. And she's still the same way. She doesn't have the reflex of driving.
Well, she said she was gone. She said she was out of town just last week when we talked to you. You were right there next to her when she said.
She went out of town to Waco to school down there, and I drove her down there and came back with her every time.
She said her dad had a heart surgery.
He had heart surgery here in Fort Worth.
Well, she said
In
she was out of town.
1974, he was in the hospital. Because you were working.
He had to work.
You had work.
Well, if I was working, I was probably on the road driving.
Not when this happened, you weren't.
Where was it?
You were off. You worked that day, but you were off that night. When this happened, you were off.
I don't know where you get your information. But I didn't.
That came off your schedule from 1974.
Your work
Directly
schedule.
right off your work schedule.
I didn't do that to that girl.
Didn't do what?
Whatever it was done to her, because I don't know her. I've never seen her, never talked to her.
Prior to that night?
Well, what do you mean?
When you're saying you've never talked to her, are you meaning prior to that night?
I've never been this close to her if she was right there. I don't know her.
Did you ever hear about what happened to her back then?
I heard some stuff on the news and stuff. That's.
What did you hear?
I don't know. I don't remember. Some little girl got killed or something. And I don't. I didn't have time to pay attention to those things then. But I was working. It's not my deal.
Mr. McCurley, we're going to step out. Would you like some water? Something to drink? Soft drink, water?
I guess no.
We'll get you some water.
In this part of the interrogation, Glenn initially attempted to gain sympathy by breaking down into tears, possibly hoping to soften the interrogator's approach. However, when this strategy failed and the detectives began presenting evidence that contradicted his statements, Glenn's facade cracked. In the last part of the clip, Detective Wagner and Detective Bennett both temporarily left the room to provide Glenn with space for introspection. However, there was no major change in approach from Glenn's side. Subsequently, after enduring 2 more hours of rigorous questioning, it seemed as if Glenn was on the verge of confession, only to change his mind.
Were you inside or outside?
I was outside. I'd parked in the parking lot.
It's just people watching.
I don't know if it was or not. I heard a girl screaming in the car over a couple of cars away from me. And I went over there to see if I could help. And
What'd you see?
there was this big guy. I had her up against the door, jerking her around and this and that kind of stuff. And I opened the car door to help her out. Got her and put her in my car.
When you went to help her out, what did you see was going on inside the car?
I couldn't tell if she was wrestling against her or something. I don't know.
Okay.
And she was screaming and yelling. I put her in my car and got her calmed down. And We talked about some things, I don't know. I asked her why he was beating her up or whatever he was doing. She started hugging me, thanking me. One thing led to another. I told her I was going to take her home, and she said she didn't want to go home right that minute. We'd driven somewhere, I don't know, cartoon lot somewhere. And I let her out of the car. I don't know too much from there on.
I need you to tell us why you felt like you had to kill her.
Were you afraid she was going to go to your wife?
I guess.
Give me some more tissue.
Under the increasing pressure applied by Detective Wagner, Glenn tried to shift his narrative, attempting to create a story where he portrayed himself as the hero. This tactic might have been an effort to reframe the situation and potentially deflect blame or create sympathy. However, as the weight of the evidence and the relentless questioning bore down on him, Glenn's emotional facade crumbled and he began sobbing. This emotional breakdown likely signified the realization that he could no longer run away from taking accountability for his actions.
Confession. Is this your signature on the judicial confession?
It was a stunning admission, 47 years in the making.
To that you may plead guilty or not guilty. What is your plea?
Guilty.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty and for no other reason?
In the beginning of the trial in 2021, Glenn maintained his innocence. However, on the third day of the trial, he pleaded guilty to the murder of Carla Walker. As a result, Glenn, 78 at the time, received a sentence of life imprisonment without parole. After an astonishing 46-year investigation marked by numerous suspects and twists, the Carla Walker murder case finally received its long-awaited closure. The journey from an unsolved cold case to a successful resolution reflects the resilience of law enforcement and the power of modern forensic techniques. If you like this video, please don't forget to hit the like button on your way out and add your thoughts and suggestions in the comments.